So hello everyone, we are back with session 2 of Women in Agriculture Web Summit. In this session, our focus is Europe, Middle East and Africa. And we are having a lineup of some really awesome and cool speakers all the way from United Kingdom to Kenya and a lot of countries in between. We are having speakers from diverse background, those running agtech companies to those funding agtech companies and those working in impact sector. Our first speaker is Aline Bsaibes. Aline is CEO of ITK, a global powerhouse of agtech based out of France. Aline has decades of experience in creating digital products to cover complete agriculture ecosystem. I would like to give floor to Aline now.
Hello everyone, my name is Aline Bsaibes. I'm Lebanese by origin, but I live in France. I've been here for more than 20 years developing agri-tech. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I was born and raised under the bombs in Lebanon, so that made me very resilient, a resilient person. And always think about how to rebuild and not complain about what's not working. When I had to decide where to go to university and what I want to do, my motto was, I don't want to be in front of a PC all my life, in a room, in an office. I want to be in the field, and that's why I have chosen agriculture. So I'm an engineer in agriculture. I spent a lot of time in the field. I have a master's degree in irrigation and soil sciences. And then I came back very quickly to PCs because I was making the mathematical models for agriculture. So it regrouped with what I didn't really wanted to do at the beginning, but I was still connected to the field. My first job was to help Lebanese farmers get out of illicit crop production, because during the war there was a lot of landlords who cultivated illicit crops, and I was in USAID program to help those farmers have change from those crops to maize, to corn, to silage corn, and dairy cows. So that wasn't easy because I was a woman in front of those illicit crops farmers who were used to deal with dealers. So that wasn't an easy job, and I had to convince them to work 7 times more to earn 7 times less. That wasn't an easy task to do, but that was really a great experience. I was also at the same time a TV show presenter, on crops. So that was my way of presenting every day 10 minutes how to take care of indoor and garden plants and cultivate crops around the house. So that I did this for a whole year. That was a very, very interesting experience for me. But then I really wanted to go back to science. That was what I wanted to do, and came to France to do a PhD in applied mathematics to agriculture. Why? It's because I found out that there are a lot of knowledge that we have in science that is not put in the hands of farmers. And that would be really interesting to see how this science, how math can be put in the hand of farmers to give them insight, simple insights, even if the models can be complex, how to give them simple insights on when to plant, when to irrigate, when to fertilize, because I found out when I was doing it myself that wasn't really easy to take those decisions. So I came to France, I did my PhD, and I have also worked in research in integrating satellite images in those models to see how satellite imagery can help give more information that we don't have on the field, because input data is always lacking on the field. So how to compensate it? I worked in research for that, and then I said, research is not really for me. I want to go to a real company that provides real tools that we can put in hands of growers and farmers. And that's where I joined ITK in 2009 as a modeler, as a crop modeler. So a mathematician that models how plants grow. And I did all the jobs in ITK. It's been 12 years that I'm in the company. I was a developer, then a project manager, then a business developer, and today I'm the CEO of the company. I have the chance to have this challenge today because I'm a deep believer that agriculture has a big gap between what it can potentially do and what's doing today in terms of environment, in terms of production, in terms of also giving good insights to farmers so that they take decisions easily. So I'm deeply engaged in agri-tech. I'm deeply engaged in ITK, the company I lead today. And I'm really happy today to be talking to you about this company. So ITK is, we are 120 people today. Most of us are PhDs in crop modeling and animal behavior modeling because we work in two verticals, crops and animals. Let me focus first on crops. To make it really simple, we give simple tools that you have on your phone or your PC that helps you decide what variety to plant, when to plant, if it's a rain-fed irrigation, when it's the best time to fertilize to make the best out of the rainfall that will fall. If you are an irrigator, when, how much, and how to irrigate. When is your plant vulnerable to disease? So when is the best time to treat? We had really an objective to reduce treatments, and we found out that in some years we could decrease treatments by more than 40% because people just treat because they have the habit to do so and they don't want to take risk. But if you follow science, let's say it like this, put behind simple tools, you can really decrease the number of treatments that you do to your crops. We also estimate yield and give you an insight of what's the yield that you will have and when is the best date to harvest your crop. It might seem a little bit complex when you say, okay, how do they do it? It's only on cloud. How is it possible? Actually, we only need weather data forecast, historical and forecast. We need to know what's the type of your soil, and we need to know what crop you are planting. And with that, we can simulate how the plant is growing. If you're doing practices on your crops, irrigation, fertilization is good for us to know them. If we don't have this information, we compensate it by satellite imagery that give us insight on what's happening on your field. So it might seem a little bit complex, but in fact, science has a lot of advance in this field, and what we're doing is only putting it behind simple tools that are provided to farmers. So that's for crops. Our activity on animals is a little bit different. So we provide sensors that we put around the neck of dairy cows that measures real-time the movement of their head. This movement gives us, with algorithms behind it, insight on when is the best time for reproduction for this cow. Is it feeding well? What is the time of rumination, of ingestion? Does it have problems of mastitis, for example? Does it have any health issue? Is the cow calving? So we decrease the mortality at calving because we alert very complex calving processes to help the cow deliver. So we have also, this same sensor allows us to know if the cow is comfortable and therefore giving the right milk production. And we have recently gone into insurance. So how you say, okay, how is it possible to go from tools for farmers to insurance? Actually, we found out that this is a good complement to all our tools, because the farmer wants to take a decision, is afraid of sometimes changing his habits according to what our tools are telling him to do. So we offer him a guarantee. If he takes the right the decision that we are recommending, he's guaranteed on his output. So if he doesn't have the output that the tool is telling him that he will have with the decision that he has to put in place, then he has a compensation. And we found out that this is a way also to push our tools with to farmers and for them to be more confident to use them. So that's ITK in few words. We are also today answering a very big, actually, question that farmers for us today all over the world have a lot of pressure because the consumer wants now to consume very healthy food, environmentally friendly, that has emitted the minimum greenhouse gases. The farmer himself has to increase his yield so that he can live out of it. So the farmer has to decide every day, okay, so I have to take a decision on my field that is environmentally friendly, that sequesters carbon in the soil, that increase my yield, that covers my crop from any climatic hazard, and he doesn't have all the capacity in his head. No one has it to take all those information at a time and all the impact that they will have in the coming months and take a decision today, giving all this information. So actually, we think that AgTech in general, not only our tools at ITK, but in general, AgTech can put together all those insights and make an artificial intelligence tool that help the farmer at the end take all those information at a time and take his decision, that is the decision that's less risky for him and less risky for the environment, and reduce and mitigate his risk. So for us, it's really, that's what AgTech answers today, because farmers already have their habits, already know how to irrigate, fertilize, but they have so much thing to do to think at the same time, and there is also the consumer pressure on the product that is the healthiest possible. So I really think that that's the main issue that we are solving as AgTech in general. Okay, so if I come back to agriculture and women in agriculture, so I have read recently that more of 60% of world production in agriculture is done by women. And if we have in mind that all those women are producing our food, giving them the right insights and education to make sure that this food is healthy for the environment and for consumers, that's a big deal. So women are actually our first clients, are the first users of our tool. So when we talk about geographies, of course, the impact of women in agriculture is not the same. It's true, but if we take the world as a whole, I was surprised to see that more than 60% of crop production of food is produced by women. So for me, education is number one, and education in agriculture and giving all the insights for those women farmers, women growers to give to produce better. We're talking about improving 60% of our food quality production in the world. So it's not nothing. And it's important that those services in AgTech in general be very simple to use. We don't have to have PhDs to use them. They have to be really straightforward. Green, red, do it, not do it, put that much, don't put that much tomorrow, and that's it. It has really to be really simple. So I can perhaps talk now about one specific tool that we have, which is called CropWin. This is a tool that's really that gives insight for growers and their consultants for corn, silage and grain corn, for wheat, for barley, for soybeans, giving insights on when to plant, when to irrigate, how much, when to fertilize. What's important about fertilization is that, yes, sometimes if you want to add nitrogen, you know that you will increase yield, but perhaps it will cost you more money to buy this nitrogen and add it to the field than the return on investment that you will have at the end of the year of increasing your yield by 5%. So the tool also gives you insight. Is it worth it to add nitrogen tomorrow or next week, given that it will only increase your yield by a little and it will cost you much more? So it's really different from only agronomic tools. It also has this economic aspect that's important in taking the decision. So extensions of this tool allows you also to say, okay, how much carbon am I sequestrating in my soil? So it's a big deal today. Everyone is talking about carbon. Perhaps tomorrow we will be able to monetize this carbon. It's not yet the case, but it's important to keep in mind that the soil health, the soil regeneration is a real important issue in keeping agriculture production with time. So it's really important to know in the practices that we're doing in our soil, yes, it's increasing my yield, but am I taking good care of my soil? Am I regenerating my soils? Do I have sustainable soils to be productive at the long run? So it also takes into account this carbon issue. Other extensions of the tool allows you to decide for special crops, is it time to treat? So is there any disease risk pressure that's telling you, hey, it's really good that you spray next week because there's a disease pressure that's coming and it's good to have a prevention. So it's important to know that depending on your use, you can add on irrigation, fertilization, and if you want carbon and if you want also treatment. So that's about CropWin. It's a simple tool. It's connected to automatic weather. It has, it's connected also to a soil database, but if you know better than us the characteristics of your soil, you can add this information. It's also connected to satellite imagery, and it works on the cloud. So it's really a simple tool that works that works really simply on your smartphone and on your PC. We are not only focused on row crops, we are also focused on specialty crops like trees, fruit trees, and vineyard, especially vineyard and almond trees. So we have the same tool, but it's really specific on vine. We know that wine quality is depending on how the water status during the season for your vine has been along the season. So if you have too much water, you'll have a high yield, but you will have big fruits with a lot of water and not a lot of sugar. So you'll not produce the same wine, or it won't have the same taste if you are eating stable grapes. It will not have the same sugar concentration as crops as vineyards that will have some stress at some point in time in the season. So when you stress the vine between flowering and veragen is something that can help concentrate more sugar in the fruit. You will have less yield, but you will have better quality of grapes, either for table grapes or for wine. But it's more true for wine because the quality of wine is not the same as of sugar concentration in crops. So we help, the tool that we have helps their growers, winemakers, decide when to irrigate their vine, how to stress their vine at the right time to produce the right grape for the right wine or for the right table grape. That's the same tool exists for almond, the same tool exists for apple trees, and soon you will have also other fruit trees, but those are 3 crops that we focus on. So that's mainly our tools, that's mainly ITK, that's mainly our vision. And if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer them.
Superb, Aline. It was a pleasure hearing a passionate talk about both women in agriculture. At the same time, also the great work you are doing, like, both are very important and relevant. We do have some questions for you. So the first question is that when we talk about all these technologies, whether artificial intelligence, machine learning, they all are based on the key factor of collection of data. Now, the collection of data has always been, digitization of farmer information has always been the holy grail, because while we do talk about satellite-based technologies and sensors and all that, but when we talk about small and marginal farmers, those costs can be very prohibitive. So I would like to understand more from you that what challenges, or in case you have faced any challenges in collection of the farmer data on ground, and also please guide us about what countries you are working currently in. So that will also give us some context.
Yes. So data is the biggest challenge, right? And we say garbage in, garbage out. So if we give wrong data to the model, even if it's the greatest model in the world, it will give you wrong estimates. So it's really the most most critical part of AgTech and our services. So as I said at one point in my talk, that's why we want to rely on satellite imagery and working on it. So we are CropWin. I've been talking about CropWin. We have launched it in Kenya. In Kenya, we have very small fields. We have a lot of farmers having very small lands. And we also have combined crops. At some time, you don't have one crop at a time. And actually, we have compensated a lot of lack of information by satellite imagery information. So here I'm not talking about only about NDVI. So only, let's say, the typical vegetation index we're talking about. Actually, we work with Airbus Defence and Space that put together a lot of sources of satellite imagery information and give additional insight on the crop vegetation type and on the crop level of growth. So even if sometimes we don't have information coming from the field, whenever we have an image at one point in time, we deduce implicitly what was done before and compensate for this lack of information because I have information coming from satellite, from above. Okay, and let's say that's the most that's a ground truthing, because at the end of the day, what imports us is at what level my crop is today and what decisions should I take in the next few days for the future. So when an image comes and give you what's happening today, even if you lack some information, it compensates for it. It doesn't compensate for all. For example, it doesn't compensate for availability of some minerals in the soil, but we can deduce it actually in our models. So there are ways to deduce it. We, of course, lose precision when we don't have very precise information, but sometimes this information is precise enough to give the good insight. And that's what we're doing today in Kenya, all over a whole county for different types of crops.
And which are the countries you are already present, so that will give us some context other than Kenya?
So we have really, our biggest development is in the US and Europe. So that's mainly the ground where we play in. But we are really pushing our tools to adapt to other types of cropping, because in Europe and the US, it's really extensive, large fields. And we have really worked a lot on adapting our tools to small fields and to small farmers. And we have a footprint today in Africa. So I talked about Kenya, we have Senegal and Morocco. So that are the main 3 countries in Africa where we are pushing our service and adapting it to practices in those smallholders, small farmers. We are also working in Latin America and Brazil for soybean production, but once again in Brazil we are talking about large fields and big productions.
Super. So that brings me to a second question, like, continuing on what you have just said. Europe and America, and predominantly even when we say Brazil, the way the farming is done is very different than the other markets you are trying to target, which is typically Africa and other part of Latin America. I would like to understand more from you that because I work very closely with African Union, a lot of state heads across small countries in Africa. The challenge is the typical economics for putting up technology in hands of farmer there. Do you see those challenges also coming, because they are typically sustenance farmers, they themselves cannot pay, right? And they depend a large on development funding or the state or support from other non-governmental organization. Do you see that the business model also changing when you go to these type of markets?
All African countries are not the same. So when we talk about Morocco, for example, we have groups of farmers that pay. So that it's not individual farmers, but transformation, retail that pays for the farmer. When we go to Kenya, it's the government which is paying. It's actually the county itself that wants from one side to control the input they are giving to farmers, because they are giving them the grains, that they are giving them the fertilizers and the treatments, and they want to control where is this going and how is it used, and are they giving them to the right people at the right time to produce better. So they are actually financing the use of those services by farmers, and they are conditioning the use of those tools so that they give the grains and give the fertilizers to the growers. So it's financed by the government itself, not by farmers. And we are engaging local companies in the service. So local companies are training farmers to use those tools. So it's not just us in France sending a connection and then do with it. We have local antennas and local companies, Kenyan companies, that we have trained, and they are now training the growers themselves to use this service very, very simply. But the financial part is still today subsidized by governments in such countries, and we're not asking farmers to pay for themselves.
Perfect, very well articulated and answered, because I believe that is the way forward. Because if you see the country I live in, that's India, right? We are having the number of farmers which is equivalent to whole of Africa. So, but there are challenges of business model. There are challenges of digitization of the farmer, and luckily we are taking right steps. And it was an honor to have you. And I look forward if ITK can come down to India. And we are having close to 130 million farmers who are growing the food which is equivalent in the price or the value terms to whole of Africa. So thanks a lot, Aline. It was a pleasure having you, and look forward to have more such interaction. And I'm pretty sure that our audience, who happens to be those who support women in agriculture, would have got insightful session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you a lot, Deepak. That was a pleasure.
Yeah, so we had a very insightful session with Aline, and we already have our next guest. She is someone with a passion for working with soil microbiology. So we have got Angela D Manzanos. She is CEO at FungiAlert. By training, she's a PhD in chemical biology. And the FungiAlert, which he founded, is improving agriculture productivity and sustainability using disruptive early diagnostic tools and services. With her passion and a very interesting area of work, we would invite and take floor, Angela.
Hi, I can't start the video for some reason.
Just give me a second.
Sure.
Yeah, can you start the video now? There was some.
1 second. Yeah, perfect.
I'm so sorry. Sometimes some settings you need to change and you forgot to do that. So
Thanks, Deepak, for the introduction. And also, before I start my talk, I also want to thank you for putting together this initiative to give some visibility for some women leaders in agriculture. Hopefully, it will help inspire others. And in the future, we won't be talking about women or women leaders being a minority in agriculture, but with parity. Yes, so hello everyone. I'm Angela de Manzanos, and as Deepak very rightly say, I'm CEO and co-founder of FungiAlert. And I am very honored to have been asked to be part of this Women in Agriculture Web Summit. The name of my talk today is How Can Soil Microbes Increase Agricultural Yields? And hopefully I will, by the end of this talk, you will be able to have an answer to that. And also you will understand how FungiAlert is helping agriculture using soil microbes. I've been asked by the organizers to give a brief summary of my journey or how I got where I am today. And also I want to take the opportunity to introduce you our company FungiAlert and the evolution during the last years. So my background is in biotechnology. I actually studied biotechnology in the School of Agricultural Engineers in the Polytechnic University of Valencia in Spain. It was during my degree in biotechnology that I realized what a powerful tool microbes were and how many applications they have for our human lives and also to help with some of the world's challenges. Following my degree in biotechnology, I came to London to study a master research in chemical biology of crop protection and sustainability at Imperial College London, and that was followed by a PhD in the same discipline. At Imperial, I had the opportunity to network with key stakeholders in the industry and learn from them what were the main challenges that agriculture was facing. And that's why during my PhD, I came up with other girl, Carrie, that was doing the PhD in the same group as me, and we founded FungiAlert. FungiAlert's original mission was to develop tools that were able to alert about the presence of soil pathogens in the soil, in the field, before growers were seeing visual symptoms. So they could guide their fungicide applications more efficiently and with the hope to reduce preventative spraying. With FungiAlert, we joined different entrepreneurial competitions and we won some seed funding, also a patent application, and a mentor who, when we finished our PhD, invested in FungiAlert. That allowed us to spin out FungiAlert from Imperial College and move into Rothamsted Research Center. Rothamsted Research Center is actually one of the world's longest running research centers for agriculture. It's just outside of London. And if you're an agri-tech startup, it's definitely a great place to be because of the facilities and the access to great researchers. In 2016, we started working full-time in FungiAlert, and I actually was the CTO then. And from 2016 to 2021, we have developed our technologies. We started working with growers commercially and offering our spore sense microbial analysis in 2018. We have also had different race investment raises, and we have also received some grants from the UK government. 2019-2020, we realized that our main technology was very useful not only to provide diagnostics, but also to deliver treatments or to provide alternatives to agrochemicals. So we shifted our business model, we shifted our strategy, and earlier this year, we raised a seed investment. FungiAlert is soon to become FA Bio, and I have stepped up as the CEO. And in these pictures, you can see our very committed and great team of scientists in our lab. And down here, you can see part of our team celebrating this investment. And they are actually key to the success of our company. Now, let me tell you about some of the challenges that agriculture is facing and what are we trying to do at FungiAlert, how are we trying to help. Crop yields have increased dramatically since the Green Revolution in the 1960s. And actually, this increase in crop yields have been linked with a 700-fold increase in fertilizer use. This intensification of farming and overuse of agrochemicals are having devastating impacts on our planet. In fact, an area equivalent to 30 football fields of fertile soil is lost every minute due to soil degradation, and our Earth has lost 1/3 of its arable land in the past 40 years. Land conversion and overuse of agrochemicals have actually depleted 70% of the natural biodiversity in the past 50 years. But growers need inputs to grow the yields that they need. They need fertilizers, they need fungicides, they need herbicides. And to make things worse, the Food and Agriculture Organization has predicted that crop yield needs to increase by 70% by 2050 we want to feed our world population. So it is our responsibility now to find tools, to find things that we can give to growers in order to help with their harvest, especially if we want to see the supermarket shelves full of food. Biological products, including microbes, are a great alternative to agrochemicals. However, the agrochemical market is still huge compared to biological products. But now there are a number of drivers that are actually pushing the use and the development of biological products. For instance, regulation are putting restrictions on the use of agrochemicals. Consumers don't want to eat chemicals in their food. Agrochemicals are also responsible for fungal pathogen resistance to fungicides and causing diseases in humans that cannot be treated. And besides soil degradation, agrochemicals also have great environmental impact. For instance, the dead zones in rivers and lakes are caused by the runoff of fertilizers. At FungiAlert, we believe that microbes can help feed the world. And this is because microbes and plants have co-evolved together for the past 450 million years. They are intimate partners in virtually every process of life. Microbes help plants with the nutrients uptake. They provide resistance to diseases. Microbes are responsible for the crop's surviving environmental stresses such as drought, salinity, frost, or floods. Microbes are also key for the normal development of the crop, and this is because they influence the root growth. And microbes also impact on the flavor and fragrance of our crops. Wine is a key example for this. Now, if we look at microbes as biofertilizers, I am very excited because there is a great opportunity for reducing agricultural carbon footprint using microbes. And also, great part of the greenhouse gas emissions linked to agriculture are due to fertilizer overuse. Now, let's look at the macronutrients. For instance, let's start with nitrogen. You all know, or probably we have all heard about this symbiotic relationship of some bacteria or rhizobia with plants that are able to assimilate nitrogen from the atmosphere and transform it into a form that can be assimilated by the plant. It's not only bacteria, but fungi also play an essential role here. And this is because fungi are the ones that influence or impact the root environment. They provide shelter and nutrients to bacteria. And recent studies have also demonstrated that some species of fungi are able to provide nitrogen to the plant. Now, if we look at phosphorus and potassium fertilizers, they are greatly inefficient. Like less than 20% of the phosphorus and potassium that is supplied by fertilizers is actually used by the plant. The rest is immobilized in the soil, and it's insoluble, and the plant cannot assimilate it. Here, our microbes play a key role. They are able to dissolve some of the phosphate and potassium found in the soil and make it available for the crop. In fact, the study has demonstrated that the co-inoculation of some type of fungi with fertilizers, phosphorus and potassium fertilizers, increased the crop biomass by 80% compared to the non-inoculated control. Now, if we look at microbes as biocontrol agents, this very exciting opportunity here as well. And probably some of you recognize some of these microbial genera, and they are currently used as biofungicides or biocontrols routinely. So microbial biocontrol agents can actually protect the crop from diseases through a direct effect by basically competing with the pathogen and neutralizing it, or they can secrete some antimicrobial compounds. Also, they can protect the plant from diseases through indirect effects. For instance, competing with the pathogen for nutrients and space, or by inducing the immune response of the plant. Now, although microbes are very exciting and they definitely have a myriad of applications that we could take advantage of, there are a number of challenges associated with microbial products in agriculture. And this is because microbes are living organisms. They are biological entities that have evolved and are adapted to the environment where they are found. So it is very naive for us to think that we can take a microbe from one place and apply it in a very different setting, and for this microbe to actually be active and be able to survive in these foreign conditions. That's why microbial products are often regarded as inconsistent, or they don't actually act robustly. There are challenges such as efficacy, versatility, and persistence that are related to microbes being biological entities, are the challenges that we are tackling at FungiAlert. And we are doing that using our patented and unique technology, the Spore Sense. Now, let me show you how it works. This one is empty. Generally, it will have a gel or a matrix that is coating the inner surface of the Spore Sense, and also it has a combination of filters. Some of the chemical components that are in this gel mimic some of the root's exudates. So when the Spore Sense is placed in soil, water, or growing substrate, it attracts the microbes that are normally attracted to the root zone. And it captures a sample of those microbes that are active and dominant around the roots. The Spore Sense then is sent back to our laboratory, and we do species identification analysis, but we also isolate these microbes and we study them. We study their potential to become biotechnological products, to be developed as biocontrols or as biofertilizers. Since 2018, we have done over 1,400 analyses from soils worldwide in many different types of crops, ranging from cereals or broad acreage to high specialty crops, including hydroponics. And in this analysis, we have validated the use cases of our technology as a tool to study the active soil microbial communities, as a tool to detect early pathogens in the soil before seeing visual symptoms, and as a tool to study the impact of crop inputs on the soil microbial community, and as a tool to collect microbes, to collect microbial libraries. Now we are using the Spore Sense to study soil microbes from certain crops and conditions. Basically, we carry out the Spore Sense sampling campaigns for certain crops and conditions of interest, and we collect not only the microbes, but also all the data, all the environmental data associated to these microbes being active in that environment. Then we collect or we archive those microbes in collections, and we study them using genomic tools and in vitro bioassays to identify those rock stars that can become biofertilizers and biocontrols, and we develop them in partnerships. I hope that you can realize how FungiAlert actually can help in reduce the carbon footprint of agriculture. Our technology or spore sense can help with the precision application of fungicides. With the microbes we collect, we can have a more efficient fertilization. Also, we can protect the soil biodiversity or restore the soil biology to reduce soil degradation. Also, we have the chance to identify those microbes that are key for the carbon sequestration capacity of the soil and help increase this carbon sequestration. And overall, we want to facilitate regenerative farming. Now, in order to do this, we are continuously developing new products. Now we have the spore sense, which is targeting fungi and oomycetes in the soil. And we have also validated its use for collection of microbes and to develop microbial products. We are also now developing a sensor for bacteria, the BacSense, in order to also include bacteria in our collection. We are also improving our bioinformatic pipeline in order to be able to develop products more efficiently and identify biotechnological applications of our microbes. And also, we want to develop a nematode sensor or a NemSense in order to also add nematodes to our collection. And in order to do this, in the next year, as I said earlier, we are going to be rebranding. FungiAlert is going to become FA Bio in the upcoming months. We're also growing our team, especially our scientific team. We are looking for R&D collaborations in order to enhance or increase the impact of our technology. And lastly, we want to restore soil biology. We want to reduce soil degradation. We want to help crop production or help growers produce more and more sustainably. Now, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Hi, Angela. So already we are receiving few questions. So let me shoot the first. The first question is that how specific it is to a specific type of soil and crop, and in case it is, then actually what are the ways and means that it can be made more productive for different crops?
Yeah, very good question. So we can actually target the group of microbes that we are interested in collecting. But our spore sense, we have a very generic composition, and we have tested, and it works with many different crops. As I said earlier, we have tested it from cereals, potatoes, to high-value crops, like, for instance, strawberries and tomatoes. But we do have, modify the composition depending on the crop and the type of microbes that we are interested in collecting and studying.
Yeah, and there is a follow-up question just to the same question, that is the shelf life is a challenge for such type of products, or that's okay? Because generally what happens is that when you're having microbes, they multiply and their next generation is having characteristics generally different than their previous generation. And do you see the shelf life be a little bit of a challenge?
So the shelf life of our spore sense, because I think there are two questions here. So the shelf life of our spore sense, this is a bit challenging. Yes, we do try to produce them fresh, and we have to get them refrigerated in order to be able for it to be effective. In terms of the shelf life of microbial products, it is definitely a big challenge. And depending on the type of formulation, you have a better shelf life or a worse shelf life. Normally, liquid formulations are more challenging, and they have a shorter shelf life. If you have dry formulations, they can have a longer shelf life. But definitely when you develop a microbial product, in the formulation, the shelf life is one of the key factors that you look at.
Fair enough. There is another question. can it parallelly be used with the chemical insecticides as well? Or you have to go without any chemicals because they might interfere with each other?
So that's the beauty about our approach to discover microbes, because we use our spore sensing fields that are treated, conventionally treated. We do identify microbes that are actually compatible with some of the chemicals, and they don't have to replace them, but they can make them more efficient, or maybe reduce the need to over-apply.
Fair enough. Another question is that, what is your scale-up plan? Like, which are the specific market you want to target going forward, and why?
Very good point. So at the moment we are in Europe. We are working we plan to expand as well to the US, and we are working with some partners there in the US. So Europe is we are in Europe, so it makes sense for us to target Europe first, and the US. Now we have had some partners. Latin America will be a very interesting market, and as well Asia. But we do have to find the right partners in order to do that. So if you are interested in our technology and you are in these markets, Latin America or Asia, please do contact me, because definitely we'll be interested in us exploring those markets.
Okay, now this is a little bit of on your personal side. What was the reason for you to get into advanced studies of chemical biology and then end up typically working on microbes, right? Because what's that interest and why that passion?
Sure. So as I said, I studied biotechnology, and I was fascinated by microbes. Maybe my lecturers were able to transmit how important microbes are for us. We do have more microbial cells in our bodies, or more microbial genes in our body than human genes. So it is fascinating how microbes actually live with us, and it's also fascinating how microbes live with plants, and microbes have been responsible for plants evolving. Microbes are responsible for us being who we are. So definitely it's a world that has always fascinated me, and I think that we are very far from understanding it completely because of its complexity.
Fair enough. Another question is that we see a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture, because now everybody is concerned about the impact of agriculture on greenhouse gas emissions, right? And the way we are doing the modern farming, right, with tilling, and which releases a lot of carbon, or also reduces the water carrying capacity of the soil itself. Do you see that going forward, that there would be more need of innovation like yours, where we are able to move away from typically the green revolution enabled farming to more conservative, non-conventional, as well as sustainable agriculture?
So I think it's going to be a combination of different technologies. We are using microbes, but there are very interesting companies that use proteins or RNA, and also all the data, IK, for example, and all the softwares that are also allowing for a more sustainable or efficient use of our resources. I think that definitely there is a trend for that. As I said, soil is being degraded at an alarming rate. We need to take care of our soil, and at the same time, we need to feed our world population. So unless we start using smarter ways and more respectful with our environment, we won't be able to see crops, or farmers won't be able to produce the crops that we need. So I do think that definitely there is going to be an increasing trend, and you probably have seen that in the European Union, the Commission with the Green Deal, now in the US with the bill, the Food and Agriculture Organization as well is making a lot of publicity, or is raising awareness about the need to be more efficient and more sustainably. So definitely it's going to be an increasing trend in the upcoming years.
Yeah, so actually the focus of our Women in Agriculture Web Summit was to bring the champions like you, who are doing very innovative work and who have the possibility of having global footprint, in just not solving the basic problem of gender inequality, and be the motivation for a lot of women to join agriculture. At the same time, see to it that the other half of the world, that is the male population, are supportive to your cause. And at the same time, also focus on sustainability and environment-friendly agriculture. Now, that brings me to the question which I have been asking since morning in the first session as well as in this session. How do you motivate, or what would be your message to all the young girls who are watching you and they see a success story, a motivation in you?
So I think that it is important to have a cause, and have a personal mission. I do see a lot of young people being very conscious about the environment, about the world, about plastic. So I think that all these maybe awareness that has been raised, it's definitely having an impact, because I am delighted when I see younger people, so concerned about environmental issues. And definitely, when you study as well, you do need to probably motivate yourself of how can you make a difference with your studies and with your experience, and how can you maybe execute your personal mission that probably can be to help the environment, or to help our planet.
Now, a very basic question, I know this is a difficult one, but you can be diplomatic if you want to be. Have you faced challenge of gender discrimination when it comes to the scientific research community?
So I haven't.
Let me phrase it a little bit more simply for you to answer. Do you feel that it is more difficult for women to be scientists than the male counterparts?
So in Spain, it is true that you see a higher ratio of male being PIA than woman. However, in the UK, I feel that is where I did my PhD, and especially at Imperial College, they did put an active effort to avoid that discrimination. So I guess I was very fortunate to be in Imperial College, because in the UK, they have this Athena Swan Award, that actually rewards institutes or universities that have a gender equality. So I guess that's what I've seen in terms of the scientific community. In terms of being an entrepreneur and being a scientist or a female entrepreneur, young entrepreneur, I have maybe experienced more challenges by being regarded maybe as less aggressive than male, or maybe less experienced when fundraising. And then I realized that other male entrepreneurs that maybe had less track record than us, or less success case studies than us, were getting funded while we were not getting funded. And definitely, as a female founder in Agri-Tech, I do think there is this gap.
That's a very cool answer, and I'll say hats off to all those in UK who are supporting women and make them feel that there is no gender bias, and that's a very refreshing change which we see around. Now that brings us to our last question. We would like to understand, going forward, do you believe that because you have reached where you have, you would like to support more women in agriculture?
Yes, definitely. I would like to be visible and to encourage and inspire other women to be leaders in agriculture. You see a lot of women in agriculture, but not that many as leaders. And I think by being visible, being present, being there, it's a way of maybe help other women take that step forward and pursue a leadership in agriculture. And I will be delighted to help and to be contacted to act as mentor, to give advice. If in my short experience, hopefully I can be helpful.
Now, you have already taken the first step by participating in this web summit, which is focused on women motivating women. Right? So we are having a beautiful panel of so many nice speakers. So thanks, Angela. Thanks a lot. We're already having another awesome global change maker, a rock star, Carla. She's already here. And even after this summit, we would be connecting all the 25 speakers together and see if more magic can be created. So thanks, Angela. Thanks a lot. And I would like to introduce to all our audience our next speaker, and she's Carla Tanas. Carla is CEO and founder of Future Agro Challenge and is a successful entrepreneur with strong social leadership skills. A citizen of the world with deep intercultural understanding and international experience, having lived in 3 continents, that is US, Middle East, and Europe. She's leading a global initiative for future of food and agriculture, and she runs a very successful initiative, which is Future Agro Challenge, where she invites startups and innovators from all across the globe, which compete with each other. And finally, you have one winner. And that winner is supported to ensure they're successful. In her cohort, there have been a lot of successful people who have done very well, and I've been fortunate enough that I happen to be one of among the top 10 in 2019. Thanks, Carla, for both being speaker here and giving us food for thought, which has made me motivated to work in this sector more. Floor is yours.
Deepak, it's a pleasure to be here always, and thank you for your continuous inspiration. So I suppose you invited me here to give a bit about my story and speak a bit about, as a female agripreneur myself or entrepreneur, how I ended up in the position I am in. My story as an entrepreneur actually started 3 days after I graduated university. And I often say that entrepreneurship found me. I was never somebody that knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. As a female entrepreneur, I, like many, have encountered many obstacles around gender and bias, especially being a young female. It started at a very young age, around 20 years old. Starting the entrepreneurship journey wasn't in agriculture, actually. I turned into the family retail business into a catering business. And even by then, at the age of 20, I encountered gender inequality within family politics. Coming that, there's different origins, different cultures, you tend to see that there are some gender inequality in the way you could move forward. Which led me, again, I turned and I looked at it as an opportunity, and I started my own events business, and which became very successful. It was an event agency which catered to customers internationally. I was looking at budgets between 2 to 3 million per event. And within several years after doing what I was doing, being very successful, I decided that I was going to sell this off. And the reason being was that the supplier relation did not intrigue me. There was a lot of gender bias behind the scenes of running events. And I thought that this is not the way that I wanted to move forward. So I decided that I wanted to take my previous experience and do something impactful. And what more was it? I was looking around, living in Greece, and there was the crisis back in 2012. And so I wanted to be part of the change to see how I'm going to take that and move it forward. And since 2012, we co-founded with my partner, Industry Disruptors Game Changers. And this is a nonprofit organization that supports innovation and entrepreneurship, especially targeted towards the youth. Greece, if you imagine, before the crisis, was a very public sector mindset. A lot of people were motivated that when they finished university, you go into the public sector and you always have a forever job for life. So trying to change this mindset and say, why don't you take opportunities to try your own business was a really difficult change, because you had people who were reactive to saying, I could have something safe for the rest of my life. Why would I do something like this? Slowly, as crisis turned into opportunity, we did manage to be part of the first runners in the innovation ecosystem here. And since then, Greece has become one of Greece has really grown as far as the innovation ecosystem, creating a lot of interesting startups, and the scene here has really grasped forward. In 2014, I fell pregnant, and then I took a look around me, and this is where I said, okay, now something is really wrong. This is where I wanted to get involved with the food system. And so what more can I do? I started Future Agro Challenge. Future Agro Challenge started as a simple competition, because back then a lot of people were looking at agriculture and the food system from traditional standpoints. In 2015, there was just a handful of people in the industry that were looking at it from an innovative eye and saying what solutions we could bring forward. For those who don't already know, Future Agro Challenge, this is now a global initiative in over 60 countries across 5 continents. Our aim is to address the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, zero hunger. And the essence is to be part of the solution. Nobody by themselves could do this by themselves. Our philosophy at Future Agro Challenge is that ag and agriculture innovation comes first. And the global food system is so integrated that you need all cultures, you need everybody to be part of this change. So what more can you do than to create a systemic approach in doing that? And not through traditional nonprofit organizations, rather than bringing the frontline runners to the front scene. And those were our agripreneurs. In order to do that, we created an international competition where we would seek out local agripreneurs from around the world and give them the opportunity to highlight themselves in their local community and then make their way into the national level and then into the international level. Now our global challenge is running in over 60 countries. So we have entrepreneurs like yourself who have come from all walks of life, everywhere from India to Africa to Europe, from Latin America. And we've seen all different types of challenges and all different types of solutions, everywhere from farm to fork. And it's amazing the work that could be done when you work at the very local level, because it's just about bringing those pieces together. So we work with partners across the globe, and we do this with the aim to inspire local entrepreneur innovation ecosystems nowadays is where we're looking at. It's not only about the entrepreneur finding a good idea or getting the right funding, but if they don't have the ecosystem around them, then there's no way that, it's not no way, but it makes it more challenging than for them to flourish. A lot of times we do have in many of these countries brain drain because the ones who are talented will tend to get investments from other places. So in the aim to support local ecosystems, our work is really on the ecosystem level. Our global international competition leads to the Global Agripreneur Summit. And Deepak, if you have 2 minutes to play that video just to give an idea of what the Global Agripreneur Summit looks like.
Sure, I'll do that straight away.
Just to say a few words about the Global Agripreneur Summit. This is a traveling summit that goes from country to country, and this is the climax of where the international competition leads to. We bring in all our finalists from around the world, along with speakers and investors and mentors, and this is a place where they could exchange knowledge. So if you want to start it.
Yeah, start it.
I don't think it's it. I think you have something else here.
Just give me a second.
So one of the main things that the Global Agripreneur Summit actually achieves is the ability to energize traditional agricultural communities. We've seen this happen when we were in Colombia. We've seen this happen in South Africa. We've been to Turkey. We're in Greece. We've been in discussions to bring it to India. And it's really fundamental when you could bring the whole innovation ecosystem to come to work and to give light to those from farmers to policymakers to see that being part of the experience, what they could do at the local level. So here is the summit. I don't think there's sound, but it doesn't matter. I'll just give everybody an idea. As part of the summit, we even award our female agripreneurs, those that are making change. And we were happy to see them come from different walks of life, even from South Africa, from Colombia, from all those places. Now, as I mentioned, what we really do when we bring all these pieces together is really work on the ecosystem level. By bringing that, we have also introduced the Future Agro Challenge Impact Makers program. And this is really how do we bring organizations, no matter what the size, small or big, around the world to build successful agri-food ecosystems. And this really focuses on empowering and strengthening capacity builders, and the aim to help achieve employment generation, socioeconomic development, and community development with further collaboration. We piloted in the MENA region with 11 organizations, and they are already working together on more projects and funding for newer projects that are coming out. And soon we're going to run our second cohort connecting the MENA region with Sub-Saharan Africa. The importance of collaboration and ecosystem building is fundamental because agriculture is a 10,000-year-old industry. To make that change is not going to happen alone with technology. You're talking about layers and layers and layers of understanding. I want to bring forth some important aspects. Crops in themselves are gender biased. There's a gender differentiation in crops in themselves. We have what we call cash crops, and you also have what you call crops that are built for great reputation. It's important we really go down to the local level of the community. There's some countries, for example, in some communities where cash crops are a reflection, and which are harvested once a year, are a reflection of male-dominant crops. This is something that the male will use as an investment process. Whereas crops that are great for reputation is something female-oriented, because a lot of the times these are crops that are around the nutrition of the community, of the household, and taken into accountability. Just from understanding the differentiation in the crops, you understand that the technology in itself cannot solve that. If we move to the level of the culture in itself and the way the community works, you can see all walks of life in all different countries. I'll give you two different examples. For example, in Ethiopia, females are less pronounced. They tend to be more within their household. Even though they're working in agriculture, they're not the ones who are really pronounced and really out there. Actually, they are the ones who have the appetite for knowledge. They're the ones who transfer knowledge within their household and communities. Yet they're not accounted for when we talk about agricultural in the GDP, when we talk about agriculture on the policy level, and when we talk about agriculture on the gender bias level. In Indonesia, another community, the inheritance from one land to another actually goes through the female, doesn't go through the male. There's a lot of female dominance and a lot of aspiring female agripreneurs in Indonesia because of the way the community and the culture works. So before we go to understanding the technology in itself, we really have to go down to every layer in the community and really understand what is happening on the way the crops work in themselves, the way the community works in itself, the way the culture works in itself, before we can start building and there is no one-stop fits all solution, but a solution that could help these ecosystems come together. This is what we do at Future Agro Challenge, and this is why we believe that everybody has a piece of the puzzle, and working in a systematic approach is the only way that we could bring this all forward. And that's my story in general.
Great, Carla. Awesome story. Very inspiring, right? And the way you, I'll say that, phased it, right? From the challenges you saw, opportunities you created, and then converted it into something which is an ecosystem. So my first question to you would be like, as you have very rightly pointed out two geographies, and I have a honor or opportunity of working in both of them, Indonesia and Ethiopia, right? Very diverse type of societies. And as you rightly mentioned, Indonesia is very much, specifically in agriculture, women-dominated society. And similarly, you'll find in Vietnam as well. So both Indonesia and Vietnam, you see like, even in corporate sector or in enterprise sector, you see like, women are on the forefront of it. While in the Ethiopia, they are a little bit subdued. Now, when you work in 60 countries, right? And definitely, as you rightly said, that you work with a local partner. But as an organization which is controlling or which is trying to work with all these organizations, how difficult it is to understand the gender dynamics of each country you approach, because I believe there are nuances which you have to understand rather than just listen from second-hand source.
Definitely, it is very challenging because it's very complex, Deepak. We tend to think of gender equality as, how much investment does a female get, or gender equality, how much do they get as far as funding from any organization or from, getting into a bank. But there's so many alternatives. There are cultures in which, as you said, some females prefer not to do that. It's not a matter of not being able to. It's not within their culture. It's not within their wanting to do that. So when you understand, to be able to go down to that very level, we have to really engage on the local aspects. And to do that, we could only do that with all the partners we have across the system. And that's why our Global Entrepreneurs Summit is really strong, because we bring these conversations and these dialogues forward within and hold workshops around that, in which we discuss with policymakers about these different approaches that could be taken on the very local level.
I would also like to understand, building an ecosystem is so important, right? And how strongly other women try to support, right? And especially those at the high seat, right? Because you see, not too many, but there are quite a lot of women on the high seat. So do you get those support, or once they also reach on the top of the pyramid, their interests also become a little bit subdued? What's your view on that?
Again, it's a case by case and a character by character. We need to remove away from the gender discussion in a very, in a level that it's a one size fits all. There are females who are very active, just like there are males that are very active. There are, female leadership positions that once they get there, don't motivate to do much else. There are others that do. So it's a matter of really driven by the person behind it. We are happy to see that the dialogue is becoming intentional. And I think that is the importance, and very much like your web summit, it is here today, the intentionality of bringing more female voices forward. What is important as well is that we bring female voices forward in more layers of the agricultural system. It's not, I understand that AgTech is a big voice, and it is this many solutions to bringing sustainable agriculture forward, or addressing the amount to, supply and demand to come forward with the population growth. What is important though is to understand communities. We have to understand cultures. That is agriculture in itself. So, and this is a big discussion point that nobody is speaking about when we speak about the gender equality, bias.
Now, moving away a little bit from the women-specific topics, I would like to understand, you have interacted with so many startups, you have interacted with so many innovators, you have interacted with a lot of ecosystem players. How do you see the AgTech ecosystem evolving in general, and specifically in Europe and the countries, for example, Greece or Spain, where or Netherlands? How do you see it doing? I'll say that in terms of innovation.
I think that the AgTech scene is moving in a very good pace. I think we tend to see a lot of young farmers who are adopting new solutions. Even across Europe, even across Africa, there are solutions really happening in the rural areas. Where the difficulty lies is the generational gap. Those rural areas where you have older farmers, or you have older generations that have worked in a way, because farming is also a lifestyle. So they've worked in a certain way, is coming and telling them to do it differently. I think with the new, especially in Africa, where there's 60% of them is youth, there's going to be a very fast transmission of AgTech in the next coming years. And I think it's already happening in front of our eyes.
And this is actually a follow-up question to what you just said. We have seen that a lot of innovation is happening in, if you see that, few pockets, some pockets of Europe, in America, typically in US, you are seeing there is a complete new bio-revolution happening. less on digital side, but pretty strongly on BioX side, right? From gene editing to different sort of inputs and different ways of doing farming, right? The regenerative farming, and which is turning around the whole ideas which we were having on farming. And then suddenly you go to Africa and you tell someone that actually the tilling is not required, or tilling is the waste of time. Why are tilling? So how you see, because you work with the different countries, people from different walks of life on different part of the ecosystem, how do you bridge this gap between where the technology is being created or thought about and where the technology needs to be deployed? Because the real change is going to come when Asia, Latin America, and Africa, they start adopting these technologies, because this is where the food balls are, right? And it is very difficult to take a technology from US and Europe to this part of the world. In fact, at Honeybee, we work very closely with tech companies who are working in these advanced market to bring their solution to Africa and Asia, because you need some nuances. In your view, what do you see how to bridge this, I'll say, that deep divide of technology companies? Even if you see that previous speaker, he was talking about going from Europe to US, right?
Yeah.
And that's challenge. Do you see that this gap getting bridged, or it's too difficult for people to take it on?
Look, I really believe that the fact, one thing farmers, and for farmers to adopt it, farmers themselves have their own egos, right? They've been doing something a certain way. They've known how to do it. They've been leading and doing that. It's like somebody coming to your house and telling you what to do. If you don't take ownership of that, you will never do it. You feel it's somebody's intruding into your household. And I think that's the same, that's what's happening in these countries, in India and Africa and in Latin America. What we are seeing is the youth adopting and owning these technologies, whether it be a transfer of knowledge, whether it be a replication of what they see in other markets and doing it themselves in their own, in a domesticated way. But the fact that they adopt it and they know how to distribute this technology or how to speak with the adopters of this technology, I think that's a fundamental part in moving things forward. And again, we are seeing this change. We are seeing younger farmers getting involved. We are seeing younger farmers getting engaged in all discussions, getting out there and trying to adopt these technologies and becoming ambassadors for change in their own communities. So this is happening. What we do also see is the challenges of coming from worlds like Europe or the United States and trying to adopt these technology and expand it. It's not like Facebook, which could expand, globally so fast. These technologies really need to work on the cultural level, and and this is where the gap is. So either they adopt a partner, or they might have to be fast enough to do it before somebody local will do it themselves.
Now, again, a follow-up question on this. You work with, again, the startups from across the globe, and you're having, I know, that super awesome network, right, in all these countries, because your alumni and your cohorts, right, that create a very sizable, I'll say that, payload, right, to get the information from. Are you seeing any shift in the way or the trends where, this whole ag tech, whether it is on digital side or a bio side, happening post-COVID, or do you see that not much has changed?
No, there is a change. There is a change, especially on the ag tech side. I think it's fundamental. People are realizing more and more that they need to do that. The bio side, again, we have to look at the infrastructures behind it, and that would be region by region based. Bio side needs a lot of infrastructure and the correct funding in order to allocate this type of technology forward, and a certain research and understanding around that. So education is fundamental. There are these changes happening. Again, I would have to tell you on a case-to-case basis, but we do see such change. And during COVID, I think it was a very quiet period for people to reflect and to see which way they want to go forward. Some people did have the ability to have such high demand, they didn't have to reflect because they had to cater to all the food system that was, deteriorating across regions. But for those who did have that and did shed light on what they could do next, there was the ability to adopt new technologies then and there. But again, it must have been something close by within the region, within local access, because as you saw for COVID, there was a big hit on the logistics market.
You are right, actually. In fact, in digital world, because I've had honor of creating a couple of companies which I exited, and at that time the focus was to just focus specifically on digital technology, promote it, be evangelist. Everywhere you go, you talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain. And suddenly when I, in my new role of working and advising and helping tech companies, whether it is bio or digital side, to come to Asia and Africa, I suddenly start seeing the total different dynamics, right? Instead of 20 people who are just trying to do code, suddenly you are having 170 PhDs, right? So, but at the same time, I realized that the big impact when we see on how the farming is being done and trying to solve the real grave challenges of agriculture is coming a lot from the bio side than the digital side. And digital side is also a little bit more fragmented. So if you create some solution which works in India, is definitely bound not to work that great in US. However, that's not the case in the bioag, right? A good seed is a good seed, whether it is in Indonesia or it is in India or it is in US. Do you see we need to be talking far a little bit more of bioag as well, because we talk a lot about digital innovations, but end of the day, the major change makers I've seen has been the bio side of the tech. What's your view on this?
Definitely. I mean, you also have to, on the bio side, who the distributors are. We do tend to see that there is a bit of move in the bio side, and there is a lot of change makers who are doing a lot of good work there. Funding is fundamental for this part. So you will tend to see it in certain regions and not in others. But the distribution, again, I think, we have seen fundamental partners come around. We have seen a lot of collaborations happening on this. So yes, there is a drive on both ends.
So you touched the very important point, funding. How do you see funding? Is it improving, or is there change? Is there shift because of COVID, or overall in tech domain as well? Over past 5 years, 6 years, since you have been running this awesome, I'll say that initiative. I won't say it's an event; it's an initiative because it's galvanized a lot of societies, galvanized a lot of youngsters. How do you see the funding patterns changing over these 5 years in this domain?
I would definitely say within the 5 years prior to COVID, there was definitely a growth, and right before COVID, we were expecting real growth within this industry because there was a lot of investors who were starting to get engaged and saw the need for it, even though it's a long-term investment. And this is usually the part that risk takers don't want to do, is wait long-term. But in that case, when COVID hit there, and I think we see this all over, there has been a reluctancy to take on risky behavior or long-term behavior. It still remains to be seen where it's going to go, but I do believe that it is very attractive to investors, especially as the food system has come into the forefront, into the news and everywhere in the media. We're realizing that if we don't make this change as a whole, it's not going to happen. So there is definitely appetite. I just think some recovery is necessary before we start to see growth again, like we were seeing it before COVID.
Yeah, I'll just give you, it's not a question, but parting remark. Very interesting one. In fact, very recently there was a report that India is the third largest economy where actually there have been investment in tech, and the amount quoted was $1 billion. And that India is known for digital tech, right? We are not known too much of bio. And a very close friend, she very recently raised $200 million plus, right? Bio egg company, and they are moving towards raising $1 billion, just one company. So I believe that that's where the the perspectives are changing. COVID is making us more think about the bio part of it, because maybe we have seen vaccine is more important than a Facebook or a YouTube. So thanks a lot, Carla, for a very insightful session, and it was a pleasure as always to learn from you. And as we have touched investments, and we are having a next speaker who is a legend in that era, and I would like to introduce her. And thanks again, Carla, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
So hello, everyone. Again, it's a pleasure to have our next speaker, Severine Balick. She's a partner at Middleland Capital. Middleland Capital is a thematic growth VC fund investing in innovative food tech and ag tech companies. Severine is passionate about impact investing, and driving more women and diversity in tech. She has been a pioneer in her field and a very strong voice when it comes to investing in agriculture and impact-related social sector. Floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be with all of you today. And I'm excited because I think that there was never a better time for us women today in agriculture, entrepreneurs, investors, activists, policymakers to really work closely today to invent, promote new ideas, finance, technology, and solutions that will help us all to feed the 10 billion people in a more sustainable way today while trying to address some of the climate change issues. And what I find interesting today is that if we try to look back, and I hope that the pandemic and the months that we've all been stuck at home will allow us to bring some of the insights and lessons of what we saw. And for me, what's interesting is that all of us for decades, we all relied on our industrial farming, big crops, pesticide, fertilizer, animal factories to really grow and scale our food. So in a sense, we collectively did this at the cost of all actually wrecking our own global ecosystem and our own health. And we are all in a way responsible for polluting our land, destroying our soils, depleting our food of most of its nutrients, while really damaging our health, our environments, and even the sustainability of some of the farmers' business, because we see globally there are less and less farmers, and sadly a lot of them are committing suicide. So I think, ironically, we all today are creating part of the disasters of our food system. And if you look globally at diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, cancer, they just result from the food we eat and by the way our food is produced today. We now have all the evidence that sugar is making us sick, that it's killing us. We see that particularly in the US, where we see crippling costs on healthcare, on our system. We see life expectancy dropping in front of our eyes. And I think as a parent that it's quite sad that despite the way we are all have more money and created more wealth the last 20 years, actually our generation have a shorter life expectancy than our parents had decades ago. So I think that consumers today should not try to find the next fad about how to be healthy, how to stay young, and think about the next pill or the next recipe. There's no recipe today. And I think that the culprit was the food that we eat and the system that was behind the food we produced. And the secret today to our health and to restore our agriculture and to try to bring a more sustainable way to eat is just to go back to some wisdom about how we used to produce food and just all of us eat more real local food that's produced in a more sustainable way. What I find interesting today is that COVID was just actually one of the major disruptions that have been predicted the years ahead. And we all know that climate change is even today for all of us a way bigger threat. We've seen last year crazy droughts and heats and fire in California. We saw devastating storms, hurricanes, invasive insects. We saw crazy shifting seasons, massive weather volatility from Washington to Florida, from Europe, from Guatemala to Australia. And even more recently, I think it is quite scary that we see heat wave coming to Russia or Canada with 50 degrees Celsius. So I think, yes, climate change today is becoming something that we can, in our sector, all see, almost test. And it was interesting to see last year that the International Panel on Climate Change has predicted that by 2050, the world may actually reach a threshold of global warming beyond which our current agricultural system, as we know them, will no longer be able to support large human civilization. So yes, today, the single biggest threat for us of climate change is the collapse of our food system. And we already saw some really worrying signs of this during the pandemic. I was quite shocked to see in the US, a lot of farmers desperately dumping tons of fresh food in fields as the restaurants and cafeteria and office were closed, while at the same time we saw dairy meat factories trying to fight to keep their worker alive when they were not fighting themselves to save their factories. That we saw dramatic bankruptcies in the US. And at the same time, we saw thousands of people that were queuing at food banks, including single working moms, students, kids, and not just in the US. For the first time in Europe, some governments have to step in. We saw that dramatically in the UK, in France, because suddenly students and kids at school couldn't afford to just have meal, and the governments have to massively support to provide food to people. So yes, our food system today have not been designed to adapt to this major disruption like COVID. And there is definitely an acceleration of climate change today. But what I want to say also today is that we have to address this challenge, because this will define progress as for all of us as society in the coming future. But I am an optimistic, and there are good news. And the good news is that we, women, entrepreneurs, farmers, investors, academics, non-profits, activists today are working together more and more closely to rethink completely our food system to address some of these challenges and find solutions. We used to see pre-COVID that there was still quite a binary approach when people were looking at our food system. You had on the one side some people, scientists, biologists, farmers that really wanted to go back to the roots about how we used to grow our food pre-industrial farming age, and bring back some of the wisdom about permaculture, how to better use crop rotation, etc. While on the other side, the science, some scientists, Silicon Valley type and other guys wanted to push science further in order to really scale robotics, automation, all the way to sometimes even replace farmer. I believe that you don't have to be in any of this camp. Like, I don't think today that you have to be vegan and be opposing vegan or not vegan. I think that doesn't make much sense today. And one of the lessons for me of the pandemic is that there are plenty of solutions on both sides, and we have to all work together, scientists, biologists, VCs, scientists, to really try to find the best solutions, to really embrace on both sides the best ideas, and try to really use microbiology, robotics, AI, machine learning, gene editing, anything we find to really accelerate the change in our food system towards better sustainability. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a microbiologist, but I still remain fascinated by my sector, because I see that we're still at the very beginning of just unlocking some of the mysteries and secrets that is just below our feet in the soil. And what's happening with microbes and plants and insects. And I am convinced as an investor that a lot of the solutions are actually in the soil and will allow us to solve some of these climate change issues. And I feel humbled, because if you look at this potential of the soil, it's something that we actually just find to discover. And as an investor, this is something that till 2-3 years ago, I didn't really know very well. But I think that's one of the most interesting part of looking today, because there's a huge amount of potential to unlock innovation in the soil. And if we just try to think about it for a second, there's more carbon in our soil than there is in the world's vegetation globally, including the tropical forest, grasslands, all our cultivated system, and every kind of flora we can imagine on the surface of Earth. And that means that even with just a very small change in the amount of carbon we could store in our soil, we could collectively make a huge difference to improve our Earth's atmosphere. So just saying this as a way to see that I think we all collectively need both of this approach, we need the wisdom of going back to using the natural ecosystem that we have, from microbes, fungi, insects, all the way to the most advanced technology that we have, AI, robotics, automation, machine learning, to really help us fight climate change and produce better and more nutritious food while sequestrating carbon as much as we can. And the challenge for us today, investors, entrepreneurs, and academics, is to borrow from both sides. Just trying to give you a bit of background about me. I've been investing in food and ag for the last 7 years. Used to work for an impact fund in London, and joined 2 years ago Middleland Capital. And what we do at Middleland Capital is that we are investing holistically across the entire food value chain, trying to really find the best innovation that advance better food and better health for all stakeholders. We have backed so far, we started back in 2010, we've been investing for over 11 years. We've backed 21 companies, entrepreneurs, scientists, farmers, who have been all emulating this approach of inventing technology and solution to really find solutions to produce better food while protecting and restoring our environment. And I think that today we have huge opportunities to keep accelerating this change. And as an impact investor and as being based between Europe and US, I think that this is an extraordinary opportunity to accelerate the pace of change in our ecosystem.
Perfect, Severine. Actually, very, very well articulated. And I would say, there is a resonance in whatever you said. And actually, myself being an entrepreneur in digital tech area, then now being myself a farmer, 6 years back when I started my journey, being a technocrat, author of books on 4G, 5G, and all sort of AI and ML, I thought the digital technology can actually solve most of the problems. And that is where actually as a technocrat, you are always optimistic that this is going to solve the problem. When I got into agriculture, the first thing I realized, was that more you play with the nature, the more negative impact you'll be doing. And if we see today, $8 to $9 trillion food and beverage industry altogether, is creating $5.6 trillion worth of negative impact. Now, that is what we have created to our food system. And as you rightly mentioned, some of the food which we have been consuming, that's atrocious. 8,000 liters for 1 kg of sugar, right? Should we be doing that? And as you rightly said, that industrial agriculture, it served its purpose because we were food insecure, we were having challenge of feeding the world. But now we are in a scenario where actually, the biggest disaster is going to happen because of climate change. It's bigger than the COVID. It's bigger than anything which we see. Now, after prefacing along, my basic question to you is, I've seen that still the investment or the investors are not very keen to bet on regenerative agriculture or on-ground activities around those innovation. Because end of the day, agriculture is foot on the ground. Finally, you can have greatest of technology, but it needs to be implemented. And I'm not seeing that too many people funding at the farm level saying, okay, fine, 2,000 hectares, and we'll fund the farm rather than just funding the technology or this innovation. Where do you see, going forward, do you see that change is going to happen even in investor community?
Luckily, and I've been in this space for now 6-7 years. And I remember when we started looking at innovation in the space, people were even looking at us, impact investors, as being part of a certain crowd of people doing charity work. They didn't really understand that you could actually be investing with an impact focus while having in mind that you could return money to your investors, but also at the same time creating positive impact for farmers by helping them to actually make better decisions at the level of the farm, by actually diminishing the amount of chemical, pesticides, fertilizer that they were putting on the soil, while helping them to actually make more money, improving profitability on the farm, while producing better quality food. Luckily, I've seen the landscape, at least in Europe, Israel, and the US, changing dramatically. Now, there's not, I would say, every 3 to 4 weeks, we are receiving really interesting presentation from entrepreneurs looking at regenerative agriculture, soil microbiology, fungi, alternative proteins, new way to do fermentation, robotics, tons of innovations that now reach the stage where you can actually fund them and have a bigger impact on the farm level, but also on the productivity of the farmers, because the key is to help farmers to make money so farmers can become a part of the solution to regenerate agriculture. And when they become part of this solution, then this becomes a virtuous cycle, allowing them to also be part of solving part of that climate change bigger problem that we have. And that's why I've seen and I've been following with a lot of interest in the US and in Europe, the increase of now new interest from investors around carbon credits. Because I think that carbon credit is one of the really big solutions that us investors, governments, region, non-profits, public-private partnerships can have to allow farmers to sequestrate carbons. Because at some stage, we will have to support them to do that. And I see regenerative agriculture a bit like some of my co-investors used to see renewable energy 10, 15 years ago. You have to start by having some public funding on some of those programs, but then private markets alone can help accelerate the pace of change. And I'm very optimistic because I see some of this change happening already in Europe and in the US.
No, I fully agree with you. And sometimes, the hindsight is the best way of understanding things. So if we talk about alternative proteins or plant-based proteins, 6 years back, if you talk to people, you were thinking it as a fad. But now if you see today, right, we are already seeing in next 4 years that from 3% being the protein requirement from the crops, is going to be 10%, right? So we have already seen that adoption happening. And obviously when adoption is going to happen, the investment are going to flow in. My next question to you would be how do you evaluate the projects, right, when it is come to about impact related to agriculture? And do you see that gender issue also being part of your evaluation, or is it okay that actually if it is not even touched?
So we're doing a lot to try to promote more women entrepreneurs, more women investors. So in our team, we try to recruit equally our analysts, all our members. We are extremely pushy with all our portfolio companies to make sure that when they have one jobs opening, they make sure that they consider women. And I remember being tough with one of my robotic company because there was not one woman in the company 2 years ago. And I said, I will not tolerate till next board meeting that you make an effort to consciously looking at recruiting women in the team. Very interestingly, a year and a half later, there's more than 30% women, CFO, engineers, data scientists, they are women. It's not that, it's just that we all have to be a bit more aware about recruiting, pushing them, mentoring them. And I think this is a very big part of what I do every day, is that we have to mentor our entrepreneur, but also the younger women investors that join our sector, because this is the only way to have a systemic change in our sector. On your question about evaluating impact, for our new fund, we have an even stronger focus now on impact. So when we look at a new investment, we really make sure that we have no negative impact. We really assess strictly the materiality risk of every potential investment. And our investment thesis is to make sure that each new investment we'll make will have a positive impact on improving resource efficiency, contributing to better farm life, creating smarter supply chain, and advancing better nutrition. This is how we see our universe. And if this doesn't fit that box, we won't consider the investment. Then when we decide to make an investment, we have a very strict way of assessing impact. And then we work very closely with the team to support them and allow them to improve on their journey to create long-term positive impact. And I think that's the only way to work together closely with them and with also other co-investors. And we work very closely with other co-investors, impact investor, generalist VC, to try to collectively benchmark what we do, share best practice, and make sure that we help the sector grow in its way, in the way it looked, and report on impact.
Perfect. Very well articulated. And I believe, going forward, we have to ensure that there are more funds available to those people who are trying to help the world, because end of the day, that's all duty of everyone, who is involved in agriculture, because of the challenges posed by agriculture. Now, my next question to you would be we have seen that the food ball of the world is, fortunately for us, Asia and Africa, right? And these are the places where still you are having a lot of land, which fortunately has not been so far, right, being used for conventional farming and releasing millions of metric tons of carbon. Now, that is also seen by a lot of corporation as a land available for tilling more, right? Because we see that 11 billion people by 2100, more food. So let's use more land, right? So we are finding ways and means to take those land away. How do you see going forward, you as an investor looking to these geographies where you need far more impact to ensure that more and more people are aware that we don't need to touch, right, to grow palm, the tropical forest, and take away orangutans away and see to it that we get into more of challenges. Do you see that your fund or the like-minded funds would be seeing Africa and Asia from that perspective?
Two things I want to say. The first is that our geography is exclusively Europe and US and and Canada, but we, with a lot of interest, are following what's happening in other emerging markets. Africa is extremely close to my heart because I grew up in Africa. My family is still in Africa. And I think that we're also learning a lot from these emerging markets. So, for instance, something that we are not talking enough about in agriculture is that we all, as tech investors, trying to push more technology in the farm. But what people tend not to understand is that in the US alone, there are 48 million farmers that have very poor access to data because they have poor quality coverage for Wi-Fi and data. In Africa, this is even worse. In India, it's the same. So I think that the digital divide is something that should be a national priority. And I'm quite happy to see that now in the US, the new National Secretary for Agriculture has recently addressed that issue, that you can't try to push more technology in the field if we don't allow farmers to have access to Wi-Fi and good connectivity. This is the same in Africa. At the same time, growing up in Africa, I saw that some of the new telecom operators have also allowed farmers in Africa to just have technology from their cell phone that today allow them to get very huge life-saving data around climate, weather, when to sell their crops, etc. So the technology that we've funded in the US or Europe are also helping them to spread quicker the next generation in Africa or India. And also the technology that we're backing, like gene editing, AI, machine learning, are also developing very quickly in Africa and India. And I've seen recently some friends, co-investors in funds, PE, VC funds in India and Africa, finding very talented talents, IP, patents that could have been developed in the US or Europe. So there's a new breed also of talents in emerging markets that are going to invent solutions that I'm sure will then come back to us in Europe and in the US.
very fairly articulated. And as you rightly mentioned, like, at the farm level, right, even in US, the penetration is 23%, right? And if you go to Asia, it's around 8.5 to 9%, and Africa, it goes to less than 6%. So those challenges are also there. So if we want to enable farmers digitally, we need to give them internet first, and internet on their farms, right?
Yeah.
Not internet at their just house, right? It has to reach the farm. Now that brings me to the last question. I would love you to talk about your little bit of motivation, why you are supporting agriculture, and also some parting comments to young ladies who want to be in agriculture, and those remaining 50% of the world, which happens to be the male, right? How or why they should support women in agriculture.
Yes, so this is a question very close to my heart. So this is a very personal, answer that I'm going to make that I hope will help women out there. I was not working in food and ag till 10 years ago, but on my personal life, I was, because I was doing two things. I was supporting regenerative agriculture here in the UK, being on the board of the Soil Association. And I was at the same time supporting the Institute for Cancer Research, trying to unlock new therapy to find cancer. Because one of my closest friends and member of my family was an amazing doctor in the US, who very early on, when he turned 30, got brain cancer and realized that most of us today were sick because of the food we were eating. So while he was seeking treatment from his cancer, he wrote an amazing book called Anti-Cancer, and then decided that he would dedicate the rest of his life to treat himself from his cancer, but also educate people about the importance of reducing pollution, amount of pesticides, fertilizer, and go back to eat real food. And real food is vegetables, mostly plants, fruits that are grown the closest possible to you. And I supported his work, helped him write his first book. And then one day, someone approached me and said, hey, I want to start a new VC fund dedicated to food and ag. You and I have this very close friend in common. Why don't you join me to set up this new project? So what happened is that 10 years ago, I was confronted to what we call cognitive dissonance. I was doing finance on my professional life, and I was pursuing my passion around educating and pushing people about eating better and promoting more regenerative agriculture. So I found a way to luckily bring back those two things close to my heart together. And I've been doing that now the last 8 years. So that explains my passion for the space, but also my passion to educate, talk, share, and encourage women to step in and do it, because there's no age to do and follow your passion. We've backed entrepreneurs that were in their 40s or 50s as more than we actually funded young entrepreneurs. You could have been doing anything at some stage and then suddenly be willing to work in food and ag because you realize when you had a baby that you wanted to feed him better, you became a vegan, whatever reasons. I think that it's really important to follow your passion. And I think that early on in the process of, if you're an entrepreneur and looking for funding, you have to find allies. So I think it's very important when you start working on a project to start approaching investors early on, to tell them what you're trying to do, show them what you're trying to do, because you need to confront your business plan ideas with people that can support you. And along the way, those people will then help you making introduction. And that's how it works. Something important is that as a woman, I was not just supported by women, and I have, in fairness, to recognize that on the way, there were a lot of allies that were men, mentors, teachers, friends that help. So it's not just women helping women. You will see sometimes women are helping, sometimes they're not. So it's just build your circle of allies and keep your passion, because at the end of the day, you will succeed. Maybe not the first time, but the second or the third time. And that's what matters today.
Super awesome, right? Have strong allies, ensure you follow a passion, and the world will try to support you. So
and also I think that's great that today you're here to prove that you can be talking with a French girl in London working for a US fund, or an Israeli in India, or in India in New York. It doesn't matter. You need to confront your views. Also, I think this is really important to people that outside your comfort zone and different, because people have different ideas and you need to expose your views and your business to different people that will help you refine your idea.
Perfect. And these are pearls of wisdom coming from you. And I love when you talked about
and reach out and really, I'm very happy. Our emails are on our website. So if anybody needs advice, mentorings, we're always happy to talk to young entrepreneurs.
That's great. Thanks a lot for stating that, because unfortunately what happens is that founders or young entrepreneurs, they have this inhibition of accessing people. So I would request all of you, please see to it that you take help from Severine. She is having a huge body of work behind her, and it would be awesome. And if you can take her advice, because I believe success stories are just waiting to happen. It's only a matter of time. Thanks a lot.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. In fact, next we'll be talking Africa. And
excellent.
actually, I also worked a lot in Africa, and believe me, I love one phrase where they said that actually I'm African not because I was born in Africa, because Africa was born in my heart. So
exactly, and Africa is still in my heart, so I'm African at heart. Exactly.
So my love to everyone in Africa, and we'll have next speaker. Thanks everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers.
Bye.
So we are having a next speaker, Sabdiyo Dido Bashuna. She's head of gender and inclusiveness at Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. She is a senior professional with a demonstrated track record of working with market-based solutions to spur pro-poor economic development. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for participating in our Women in Agriculture Web Summit, and floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Deepak, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuned into. As has been introduced, my name is Sabdiyo Dido. I'm the head of gender and inclusion in AGRA. AGRA is the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. We are the main continental partnership that is advancing inclusive ag transformation for Africa. We are looking at how smallholder farming systems could transition from subsistence towards commercial enterprises that can sustain families, give income, and of course decent living to the rural communities that we serve. We work with governments within the countries where we are, but also across the continent. This is also to work collaboratively with government to set up the enabling environment that is going to nurture growth, develop the necessary infrastructure, and support smallholder farmers, women and youth to be able to make the transition that is necessary to have decent living of agriculture. We work a lot with private sector partners. We have a huge partnership network across the globe, actually, and we are certainly looking to deploy more and more resources, investment, capital to Africa's agriculture. We do hold the premier agriculture convening that is called AGRF, the Africa Green Revolution Forum. And this is a platform that brings all the different stakeholders together to have a dialogue on Africa's agricultural transformation. And there's one coming up soon. We have a launch on the 7th of June for this season, this year's AGRF. So please join us so that you can also hear and follow debate on how agriculture in Africa is transforming and where the pain points are still in terms of where the continent wants to be. So back to the presentation for this afternoon. Again, thank you very much to Niraj and Deepak for reaching out to us. In fact, the person who was supposed to be speaking is my good friend Vanessa Adams, but she's not, she's traveling, so she was unable to take this slot. So I'm happy to jump in and represent her and also represent her work. So at AGRA, of course, we are about agriculture transformation. And what I have done is I've just put together a couple of slides just to give you a sense of what we do broadly, but in particular, how we look at the issues of women in ag and gender in ag. And that is an area of responsibility, of course, for me at AGRA. So if you'll allow me, I'll just share a few slides, and then from there we can have the discussion.
Sure, please share your screen. You can do that. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay, good. So let me just put it on slideshow, and yeah, so this slide actually just explains AGRA's strategic framework, which is essentially these 3 levels of work that we are engaged in. We are working with the smallholder production cluster, looking at how they can access the different resources and services they need, the inputs and the capabilities they need to be more productive, to be more profitable enterprises, to transition towards more commercial enterprises from this very, very subsistence level that they are in. And of course, we work with the private sector, we work with governments. This is just a summary of what I've just given. Now, back to the gender in ag. I think we all know the statistics. Again, I'm really not going to go into rationalizing why this is important, but this is something that is also very, very important. In Africa, of course, there are a number of other issues that constrain agricultural productivity. There's climatic variability, there's the capability of the farmers, considering that there's need to continuously adapt technologies that are relevant for the time, that are relevant for the changes in climate, that adapt, for example, to the different needs and circumstances of both male and female farmers. So there's this continuous change that is envisaged, that is important. But if people do not have the same level of resources, and when I talk about people here, I'm talking about, for example, smallholder farmers, both male and female, then this really becomes creates an equal a situation where a certain group of people, and this is, for example, women, will have less access to the resources they need, and they will have less productivity. Now, of course, what this is very, very defeatist in the sense that we would like to empower the farming communities. We would like to empower farmers, but we already know that there's this group of actors, this group of producers, this group of workers that inherently produce less because of the gender constraints or construct that they find themselves in. So I think the performance gaps in productivity of between 20 to 30%, the performance gap in enterprises of up to 34% in sub-Saharan Africa, this is something that is so, so huge, and we have to do it. We have to bridge this gender gap in productivity and gender gap in profitability of small enterprises. Now, in Africa, most of the women are actually in very, very small enterprises. A number of them are very informal and very small, very tiny. They cannot access the kind of services that is needed to grow their business. So this, of course, compounded is what leads to this productivity gap, profitability gap that we are talking about. We do appreciate that the gender norms and the social restrictions, the policy barriers regulatory impediments, especially when it comes to issues around financing and credit. We know all these in the end inhibit women's performance. This is what we are addressing in AGRA. So of course, the limited access to inputs, this is just a summary slide of what I have just shared, so I'm not going to go into it. So we look at our intervention revolves around 4 aspects. So one is to ensure that women access productive assets so that they can be more productive. And we do this through our last mile services. You probably have read about our extension approach that is called the village-based advisor approach, and the local agro-dealer agents that we have promoted, we have supported to really increase the outreach. And what we have seen here, very, very good examples of how this has resulted. For example, in Rwanda, the distance between farms to agro dealers and seed, for example, for seed access, reduced from 15 kilometers to 5 kilometers. That is so significant for women, because we know that they are constrained by a number of societal and gender barriers. Mobility is an issue, safety and security is an issue. So this reduction of the distance to these input services, we have seen how it has impacted on the productivity on the farm. So these are some of the ways that we are addressing this. We are looking at enterprises in agriculture, women enterprises in agriculture, and I will speak to you very, very shortly about an initiative that we have put together that is addressing women entrepreneurship in agriculture, and that is something that we are going to speak to shortly. We're talking about women and markets and trade. We have the markets and trade part, rather the more lucrative part of agricultural value chain has been reserved for men. So the question is, how do we bring women also into this to help them to compete and to compete effectively, to take their businesses from these local levels to a more to high value marketplace. And of course, the issue of voice and advocacy, because we are addressing gender issues, this is very important. We're looking at policies that are going to incentivize women. We are looking at structures that create representation for women in leadership. We are looking to create networks and support around women. So just allow me to skip that because this is just showing our outreach in the various indicators that I mentioned earlier. And I jump now to the Value for Her initiative that AGRA is leading. And this is a continental initiative around women's agripreneurship, agri-entrepreneurship, and it's across the continent. It's actually a flagship initiative across the continent. We are looking at the main purpose as to why we push this out onto the market. One is to change the service landscape to businesses. We know that this access to business resources and services is a big constraint. So we push this so that it can alter the terms of those services and alter them in favor also of gender. You know, we're talking about altering the terms of service in relation to prices, crowding in and all that. But now we also would like to alter it in relation to gender so that we can increase the performance of these agri-enterprises that are led by women. We are looking at, we work very, very closely with very many partners to build voice and agency and empowerment. And of course, in the end, we are looking at economic equity. Now we are leveraging a digital platform. Again, this makes it relevant for this particular conversation. We are using a digital platform that brings all these women companies across the continent together to connect them to one another and to amplify their voice, but at the same time help them access the services. So this platform is structured like this. The value proposition, the offer from this platform is fivefold. So the first one is around what we call a women to women pillar. So this pillar brings women across the continents together so that they can network with one another, they can chat, they can interact, they can make different groups, they can make social groups, you know, they can discuss their own things around empowering one another, just sort of encouraging one another. We know how important social capital is for women. The second one is around women to market. This is again the pillar that helps them access high value markets. I spoke to that. It's very important because they not only earn income, but they also learn and they build their confidence in the process as they advance the other levels of the value chain. We're talking about women to know how. We know how they come in from a very low education levels. They come in from a very low exposure because they're within households. So the know-how is looking at both technical business management skills, production management skills, and so on. And then the fourth pillar is around finance, one of the age-old challenges that women face. The issue around collateral, of course, how do you access collateral-free financing, because most of them don't have land or other assets to leverage for this. And then the fifth one is around women to technology. And this is in fact a pillar, the latest pillar that came on board, and we are trying to develop this further to see how women can access technology and capital and use, for example, we are talking about processing technology, we are talking about mechanization, to reduce drudgery. We are talking about access to services that are already sort of digitized. And this is very, very crucial too, because women have they have very limited time. So efficiency is key. So one of the know-how programs that we have rolled out is called Arise. We rolled this out in the context of women entrepreneurship and recovery from COVID. We know COVID disproportionately affected women. So there is a training program, it's online. And in fact, we have the next one coming up on July 15. So again, my call is for you to join. But this is really one of the pillars of capacity building for women. The Amplifying Women's Voice one, particularly the agency, the Women to Women Network in part. Again, here across the continent, we've done a number of events, advocacy events, featuring different topics. It's around access to finance, access to markets, different regulatory regimes in different countries. And very recently, we hosted a UN Food Systems Independent Dialogue on women's entrepreneurship in agriculture. We actually led that. I was the convener. So again, here we have really increased the space for women. Right now, what we need to do is then build out those pillars so that they just access the financing they need, they access the markets they need, and they should be able to grow their businesses. So for value for her, for the women companies part, there is a criteria, and the criteria is that the businesses must have existed for 3 years, having at least an annual turnover of $20,000 and above, and it has to be women-owned. So that is the criteria. Value for her has about 1,200 women companies at the moment, and that is growing. And we are present in 39 countries in Africa. So AGRA is, of course, involved in a series of other ag tech work. For example, the use of AI and satellite data to connect premium of farmers to insurance, weather insurance, for example, reaching the last mile through technology. We have the chatbot pilot for extension services via SMS. We are looking at mechanization, access through these digital services, for example, Trotro Tractor in Ghana, Hello Tractor in Kenya, ETC in Agro, and of course we are working right now with the Cropin to support digitalization of extension services to reach about 3 million farmers. So in brief, this is what I wanted to share for this session, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for very informative presentation and the great work AGRA is doing. I would request if you can just stop sharing your screen so that viewers can have a your video coming in.
Sorry, are you saying that I take out the presentation? I will do that.
Yes, stop screening. That's yeah. So that actually when you're speaking, right? So that's we can have better connect. So again, congratulations for the great work you are doing. And I've always been I'll say big fan of AGRA and the way AGRA is promoting digitization of agriculture in Africa, which I believe is very important pillar going forward if we really want Africa to gain its, I'll say that fair share of global trade in agriculture. So my first question to you would be like, when you are doing multiple pilots, what are the challenges you face in scaling up those pilots to the level where actually like, a large number of farmers can be impacted?
Yeah. So yes, indeed. The pilots by very nature are innovations that you try in one particular context. And the challenge, of course, of taking a pilot initiative from one context to another is enormous in the sense that you have to understand the socioeconomic circumstances on the other side, socioeconomic gender circumstances in the other country, and it varies, because gender is very socioeconomic, cultural, religious, attributes that actually bring this manifestation that we are talking about, that brings exclusion for women. So the challenge is, for every community, you have to come in, you have to understand them, you have to earn their trust before you can even start to talk about these things. So it's a lengthy process. And in a global world where we are run by projects, that becomes a challenge. So this is one of the challenges that I have seen. And what we have done, especially in this particular initiative I talked to you about, the Valley for Her, is we decided to go for the women that have already succeeded, the ones that have already gone beyond, all these social cultural restrictions that are at a very local micro level. They are those that have already broken through this system, and they're already trading within the region, within the country. Some are even actually trading regionally. This is the group that we have gone for. And we use this group to plow back to the lower group that is very, very hard to reach. So this is the kind of linkages that we are creating. And through this, we've been able to scale initiatives like this one. And it has been really very, very useful and very instrumental in taking this forward.
My second question would be like, as you are rightly connecting the women in agriculture who are typically on the agribusiness side, and with them, definitely there would be impact on the women who are doing the farming on the field. Do you see that coming with more solutions targeted towards women farmers on ground?
Yes. So and I listened to the speaker earlier, and there's certainly value in having a women-to-women connection, because especially for that initial interface, initial transfer of technology and inspiration, women-to-women connections work for that. That initial entry is very, very important. That is why, for example, extension agents that are females better reach female farmers, because there is, at the local level, there are all these social, cultural dynamics. When you have a male extension agent coming to talk to a female farmer, sorry. So there are dynamics there that are very sensitive and culturally even not acceptable depending on the communities. So to make that initial entry, that women to women is important. But once the women start to rise up, and once they start to connect, and once they start to grow beyond that household, household dynamic, gender dynamic, and once they start to feature within the community, then it is important for them to in a way compete or get exposure to male entrepreneurs or male farmers who are doing something similar, because then it helps to set the pace for them. They see themselves as having grown a bit from within the women folk, but also they need a comparator, they need a challenger. So at that level, I think it's very important to have male competitors. It's in literature, it's mostly, and in the context of value chains, it's called a crossover, starting, for example, within value chains that are largely led by women. And once they start to excel there, for them to continue to excel, you have to expose them to competition. And that competition comes from the other gender. So this is really how we are also slowly creating the space, first of all, for women. And once they are comfortable enough, once they have capacity, then start to expose them to a much bigger competition. So that's how we look at it.
Super awesome. I believe that is the way forward, because Africa is having its own context, and each country is having its own nuances. Whether you are talking about Ethiopia and Ghana, or whether you're talking about Kenya and even Tanzania, next door neighbors, they have very different socio-political structures. So that's very important part of it. Now that brings me to another question that actually, when we talk about always Africa, there is a huge possibility of sustainable agriculture, because fortunately now, but maybe a decade back, it would have been said unfortunately, the green revolution has not impacted all the countries in Africa with a similar level. So a country like Madagascar, countries like Tanzania, where there is a huge possibility of value chains, which could be organic or could be regenerative or agroforestry. Do you have programs or any focus going forward to promote these ideas?
Yes, absolutely. So our next strategy, which is actually right now in design, is going to move into what we call sustainable farming. And we will be looking at all these different aspects, looking at the aspects of course, climate change is really is a big trigger for us, because if smallholder farmers do not adapt to climate change, do not have technologies, and do not have the knowledge on this, they will run out. They will soon run out of productive processes. This is certainly one. But we also do recognize that it's very important for us to take care of and to sustain the productive base. So the soil health, we are looking at the landscape restoration and management, and we are looking at policies that are going to ensure that these practices are entrenched. Of course, at the end, it's very important for smallholder farmers to still derive value, to derive income, because in the end, we are addressing food and nutrition security, but also environmental sustainability. So our strategy going forward has already filtered all these aspects into it, and is going to be a huge focus going forward.
I strongly believe that is very important as well, because in my interaction with cotton farmers of Ghana, or coffee farmers in Ethiopia, or vanilla or pepper farmers in Madagascar, we are already seeing the impact of climate change already, when they used to harvest 3 times a week to now they're harvesting 1 time a week. So all those productivity losses we are already seeing because of climate change. And I believe your initiative would be very big step and a welcome step for the farmers in Africa. And as I said, I'm a big fan of AGRA's work, and the great things you are doing is very well appreciated, and look forward to have more engaging interactions. And as a parting question, the last question for you, what would be your comment or statement for those young women who want to get into agriculture? Generally, I ask it with a global perspective, but I believe Africa is having a special place. So I would say, what is your message to the African women who want to be in agriculture?
Yes, my message to them is come on board. There's enormous opportunity here, especially for the younger females who are educated. They can use technology, they can access information on markets, and they can access information on different products, they can access information on climate. Then this is the place to be, because they can, in Africa, there's still a lot of land that is available. So there's a chance to start start right, to start right. I mean, when I say start right, I'm saying that there's enormous opportunity to do anything that one is passionate about. So this is my call to them.
Super awesome. Thanks a lot, Sabdiyo, for spending the time with us and helping us empower the women in agriculture. And thanks for sharing your insights and the great work AGRA is doing. And look forward to have you again in our future sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thanks, ladies and gentlemen. And we are having our next speaker already there. And we would like to thank Nicole Rogers. Nicole is founder and CEO of Agriprocity. She's passionate about positioning crops as functional food ingredients. She urges farmers and buyers to connect more deeply within supply chains to maximize efficiencies. Nicole has deep sectoral experience in the themes of alternative protein and dairy, personalized nutrition, decentralized processing, and environmental and socially sustainability in agriculture. Floor is yours, Nicole, and we look forward to have a very engaging session with you. Thank you. Nicole, you are on mute in case you are speaking.
Thank you. I was just saying thank you, so you didn't miss anything. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and yeah, it's true. I'm passionate about all those things. So from my perspective, what I'd love to chat about today, and I don't have a formal presentation prepared because I would love to hear from anyone who's participating also, is to have a general chat about the shift in manufacturing and manufacturing demand and how that can have a positive impact on emerging market crop production. So to start, I'll give you a little background on myself, maybe a little more deeply than you shared, Deepak. I am a farm girl who grew up in Canada, in southwestern Ontario. And I went first to the Middle Eastern market as a government representative for the government of Canada, and learned that agricultural practices are really varied, and there's this great knowledge transfer that can happen. And after that, effectively set up Agriprocity, which was born out of a desire to build more direct supply chains. So a way for a buyer to engage more deeply with farmers, and also ensure that what they were securing, generally from a manufacturing perspective from food, was incredibly functional. So functional meaning every time they manufactured a product line, it was very uniform quality output, and their cost economics were easier to manage, things like that. Where my heart lies now is here in Kenya. So I live in Nairobi, and we ended up here as a firm in 2017 working with a foundation, and we believed that we could do, I guess, a better job at helping manufacturers access the ingredients that are here in Kenya. And we chose to, I guess, prove this, so to speak, with an investment. And again, the passion is disrupting food manufacturing as a system, and really believing that emerging markets have all the conditions to make this revolution in the food system super effective and powerful. And what I mean by that is that, small farms, disparate farms, more regenerative production techniques, all of that is more the norm here than, say, in an emerged, scaled up agricultural market. So our hypothesis is that it's a great testing ground to see how we can service that growing demand from consumers to have greater accountability in manufacturing chains in general, but specifically in food manufacturing chains. So yeah, that's a little more deeply into me. I don't know if anybody has any questions. That was a long diatribe, or I'm not sure, Deepak, how you want the flow to go. Is there something that you think the audience specifically would love to know about
Sure.
about
Sure.
manufacturing, food manufacturing, and disruptions in that space.
Sure. So actually, like, if you see, like, your expertise has been in ingredients, and actually, like, your expertise has been in the modern food, I would say that, right? Somebody who talks about alternative protein or plant-based protein, that itself shows that actually we are moving away from the, like, I'll say that conventional line. And secondly, like, coming all the way from UAE to Africa to ensure that, like, you are able to leverage the value of quality food ingredients, especially, like, grown in a sustainable and regenerative manner. That's very, I'll say that, refreshing, and I would like to appreciate you for that. So my first question around this would be, like, how do you see, like, Africa, which is being seen typically as, like, low productivity continent, right, when it comes to agriculture, but having a huge value where the native ingredients can be grown and which are flavor of the world, right? How do you see that, like, this possibility of scaling it up? Because you are here, that means you are confident it can be scaled up. So we would like to understand the perspective that how do you see it scaling it up, and what are the typical markets you see that, like, Africa would be able to serve?
Yeah, so let's start at the macro. So the macro demand, as I see it, is that for radical transparency, let's call it, in food chains and food systems, and it starts at manufacturing. So I think what's happened as food supply chains have grown to meet demand, they become more and more centralized, and it's a lot easier to produce one crop purposefully for a dedicated supply chain. So all along that supply chain, you build infrastructure that's incredibly purpose built. It doesn't make sense in a scaled agricultural production approach to process, garlic and carrots in one facility, generally speaking, has been the model. And it's very old-fashioned economics. And it makes sense in manufacturing economics that you focus, you invest in the infrastructure to do more of one thing and do it super efficiently. So I think what makes me really excited about Africa, and I would say all emerging markets that are big agri crop production houses, is the opportunity to not compete with that existing system, but build new systems. So I think when you talk about regenerative agri production or small scale production or decentralizing food chains, there's a lot of investment interest in the US and Europe. But fundamentally, I guess my belief would be it doesn't work in those markets because you have to decentralize the farms first, and those farms have been built generally around a large central system, and to get them to think about a small 1 acre model, it's just impossible. They've already scaled up to grow carrots for a Costco, let's say, or somebody big. Whereas, like in Kenya, our findings and certainly our modeling has shown that we have this awesome opportunity to find farmers that are producing at a small scale. So the decentralization happened and is happening, and we need to just layer on an awesome processing solution and make it innovative and design it for Africa or for India or for an emerging market where the conditions for small scale production exist, as opposed to being a large food company and coming to Africa or Asia or any emerging market and saying, we're going to build a giant potato puree company and model it off the way it looks in France or the US.
Super. And this is a add-on question to what you just said. When we talk about decentralized processing, right? So that is also having, I'll say that, intense investments required, because definitely you would like to move the processing closer to farms. Then only you'll be able to take care of or leverage the value being created by small farmers. Do you see the model of community working here, or do you see it has to be the private enterprise who puts multiple facilities to take care of it?
So we do engage. We have a community engagement model because I think in order for the unit economics to work, you don't have to have like a contiguous smallholder adoption, but it works a lot better if you have a lot of uptake in a certain geography, because you can build the infrastructure and get a lot of acres on board with greater efficiencies. But from my perspective, I think what we're trying to do is allow a smallholder to manage their own P&L and add value to the crop in a meaningful way so that we can subsidize what would otherwise be deemed an inefficiency of a decentralized model. So we're trying to create a model that you take an input that's really competitively priced in a market like Kenya. So our first supply chain is we're building, or we have built a powder manufacturing facility. So effectively what we're doing is we're working on a regenerative rotation crop cycle. So every farm is selling us a minimum of 4 specific horticulture crops. And then we add value at our facility, our processing facility. And in some cases, we're extracting a flavor profile. We're creating even more premium right on site. So taking an onion and adding heat to make it, taste more smoky, or some other kind of flavor enhancement, let's call it. But our extraction process is super natural and super back to basics. So we're talking about reimagining the whole system. It doesn't have to be a very sophisticated factory, but the output is incredibly high quality, and has such a quality story that you're guaranteeing a better return for the farm. So you can make it possible for them to continue to farm in that small scale way, because we're really like an enabler, let's say, of the individual farm. But for sure, if you get a community of these individuals, it is for sure easier, right? It does make the system better. But we tend to operate on a real private sector model of economics.
Fair enough. Now that brings me to another question, which is, I believe, is relevant to what you just said. Do you see that training to the farmers playing an important role here? Because you are trying to create a high value product that also needs the high value agronomical practices, right? To ensure that you're having a good productivity. At the same time, you minimize the losses, because it's labor of love which is being put in growing every onion, which would be coming to on a platter of really, I'd say that high value purchases. So do you see that that the training playing a very important role and updating farmers about the practices?
So look, I'm a bit controversial in this. This is maybe not what my team and my co-founders would want me to say, but I'm very anti-extension. And maybe it's because I worked in advisory for so long, and I've worked with lots of big groups, not-for-profits, foundations, whose whole goal is to provide these skills. What we rather focus on is certification. And so we're trying to train farmers via meeting certain, markers in terms of, say, soil science or soil quality. So designing a system that works for both the buyer and the farm. So we do a lot of really economical soil monitoring, data capture. It doesn't necessarily need to involve training, but it's like subvert training. So basically, we're teaching the farmer about very basic principles of soil and soil health. We want to see carbon increase, we want to see nitrogen increase, and we want to see a microbiome increase. And so we measure that more qualitatively, but we basically want to show that we have more bugs, more fungi, more worms, we can call them fancy soil science things, but that's really what you want to see. And we can encourage the farmer by having really patient financing terms, and encourage them to have certain rules of conduct, honestly, is how we tend to work it out. So no synthetic pesticides is like one of our rules of conduct. And it's really because we're trying to encourage their soil functionality and their soil fertility and their soil, say, like productivity overall over the long terms. So most of our farmers, we've made a commitment. We're going to source from them for a decade, let's say. And then we wrap it in patient capital, because regenerative farming and smallholding farming, there's so much risk, right? So we as the processor can assume some of that risk, because we can take lower quality. We're not looking for the perfect fresh produce, which is a huge problem for small farmers, in my opinion, especially in markets farms that don't have good cold chain and other supply chain infrastructure, but as well as, guaranteeing a certain amount of revenue so that a farmer can really look at their own profit and understand what that minimum is each year. It's teaching them that their farms becomes more valuable because their soil is their asset, right? So I guess in a way, I'm saying I'm contradicting myself, because all that is training, but it's very, it's not overt training. It's training that has a very closed loop of like benefit, mutual benefit, right? So we're doing it because we want our crops at a certain price and we want a guaranteed minimum. And we want to be able to share an environmental story from a marketing perspective. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not extension.
No, precisely. In fact, I love the way actually you are creating incentive mechanism for people to be like, I'll say that cajoled into doing things rather than telling them doing something. And as you rightly, I also agree, though I'm not a big hater of extension service, right? I won't be that controversial. What I believe is that unfortunately, the structure of extension service is to push farmer do things, right? Whether it was 1960s, 70s, 90s. I don't want to name what events happened there because that would be making me controversial, right? Now, those have been, I'll say that every time the farmer has been told, if you do this, you'll make more money, but that never happened. And now we are sitting in 2020 and now we are giving one more. Now this I can always speak because I'm part of that industry. I can take that liberty that we give carrot of like we digitize and you'll again make more money, right? How far it is gonna go, right?
Totally.
So, I like the model which, and I'll be following you more vigorously to see actually where it goes so that it can be replicated in yeah, please.
This is the hope, honestly speaking, and why I moved here as a foreigner. Because I have a Kenyan co-founder, so that was highly motivating. But what was really motivating was to build a process. The process is the hardware. You actually need a brick and mortar facility to certify within, but the process is also the disruption, right? And if these processes and new systems for, getting calories, flavor, everything out of fields in small farms, if we don't harness that, if we don't, really truly create a system that is by an emerging market for emerging markets, we're never going to get it right. You can never have someone who pops in to the market as an expert, who also sells inputs, who also sells seeds, who also does all these things. It's very difficult. And what I found always when I was working here in an advisor or an investor capacity is the power of the input dictates the program. And I think what we've done really effectively is find like a mutually beneficial relationship with our farms and educate them. We're like, look, if your microbiome is good, we're going to sell more of your crop. It's going to taste better. Everything will be better. So don't just grow a tomato because you were told to grow a tomato. Think about what you feel has traditionally grown in your soils, and we then find a better market opportunity too. And generally everything we're sourcing tastes better, like 1000%. But what's been really curious is how much of a higher nutritional content we get. So there's this, we're like selling ingredients, but we're almost selling a microbiome story. Because, if you have a scaled agricultural project in California, which we've done direct tests of certain crops like kale, we actually see, a quality proposition from a market like Kenya that you can't compare. You can't argue the science of what is in that leaf once you dehydrate it. And so we're a dual company from a product development standpoint. We have a US product development team and we have a Kenyan product development team. And that's strategic because the US team is really great at the flavor extraction side, understanding how to sell kale powder to, snack food manufacturer. And there's like a different sense. And what the Kenyan team is really good at is figuring out all the labor hacks. Like, okay, in New Mexico, it's quite expensive to char onions. It's like a pretty involved process. It's actually quite cheap in Kenya. Dehydration is a lot cheaper in Kenya. So yeah, we kind of have found a way to sell this to the farm in saying that we're really committed to nutrition and flavor, and you have to do a good job farming. Because if you don't, you can't create that profile for us. But what's pretty cool is that they have a moat around them as a small farm, because the way you make your food taste good is you have to grow lots of crops on 1 acre. Like the more you rotate, the more you do some natural practices, the less pests you have to fight with synthetic pesticides. I mean, the better your food tastes, the better your crops taste. There's no arguing it. We've seen it in our trials. It's really remarkable. And what a moat for emerging market farmers, because they're just doing what they already did. We don't need to train them. We just need to create rules.
True. No, I fully agree. Like, see the taste of tomatoes, right? Past 8 or 10 years, right? From such a flavory, vegetable, it has become like, just I'll say that something which fills your refrigerator because it gives color and it gives you feel of that it is a tomato. Right.
That's
so I strongly believe that we have to move back to getting the taste in our food, and just not taste. Actually, it is very important. Also, there are a lot of factors which foods give us, like immunity. Right. Currently, the food we eat, hardly giving immunity. And again, this could be controversial. Maybe we are having so many pandemics because we are eating something which is definitely not helping our bodies to become better. Right. And now that
so
brings
true.
me to. Yeah, that brings me to another question, which is it's, I believe, because when we talk about alternative proteins, right, suddenly you'll be seeing that there is a lot of shift in demand, right, which currently 3% of our crops being in protein or protein-related crops being grown. Suddenly, in next 4 to 5 years, it is predicted that 10% would be requiring protein. Do you see again people taking that same industrial agriculture route to that, or do you see that in this time we would be smarter of not doing what we did with cereals?
Look, I love sharing analogies. I think most people love analogies. So let me answer that with an analogy. So I think that the plant-based market is trying to showcase how healthy it is, right? It's a very healthy choice. And so there's been a huge flurry of new product development to capture this health trend. I think largely it's like for like. So a non-fish fish stick kind of has the same ingredient makeup as a fish stick. So everybody kind of raced. The innovation was in the isolate and less in the product development. And, kind of all the same dirty label things are on there. You've got synthetic flavors, natural flavors that are derivatives and so far removed from what was the actual pure ingredient. And then you've got some really traditional, important functional food ingredients like maltodextrin. So we've been working and doing a lot of focus groups because ultimately our processing chains are quite simple right now to prove. But the goal will be to make them more complex and harness, again, all these raw crop inputs and figure out ways to make a more back to basics extraction approach work. And so maybe like 6 companies we've spoken to in the last month are exporting an alternative protein manufactured product and being basically not listed in some of the major retailers in the US because of very, very, I would call them prolific functional food ingredients like maltodextrin. And when you speak to a food scientist or a food developer, they say, crazy. They say that doesn't make any sense because that product is the same. There is nothing about that ingredient makeup that is different than a fish stick or something that's already listed in the store. But what you take from that is that as a category, retailers, and who knows who else, this is just a retail example, are taking a stand that these have to be clean products. It's not the Food and Drug regulatory authorities that are doing it. And so how interesting that as a category, it has the opportunity to transform the whole space because these are ingredients that have been in food products for like 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, right? And if, new products created with a plant-based, I guess, call it a value proposition, are not going to be allowed, like are being kind of excluded, it's super curious, right? Like for what's going to happen. And yeah, we've heard it now multiple times. So, there's going to be this sub-regulation for plant-based products, manufactured food products, that retailers are going to be really strict on and say, you as a manufacturer, we're holding you to a higher standard than your competitors. It's wild. It's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And now that's bring us to the last section, where let's talk a little bit about women, right? And I would like to understand from you, like, you are an entrepreneur who have worked in UAE, right? You have worked in Africa, right? And you have worked in North America. Now, what do you see, like, the change in the mindset or change in the opportunities, where we see far more women entrepreneurs in agriculture domain, predominantly from America, then a little bit from Europe, and nearly nothing from UAE and Africa.
So it's funny, like this is a bit controversial maybe, but my personal experience is the most sexism I ever felt as a female entrepreneur in the sector is, I would say, always from a North American perspective. There's a belief, the only time I think I'm taken seriously is when I give a background of my family and where I'm from, and like what my dad did and what my grandfather did, and a legacy. Then there's more of a belief that we are, I have the credibility. But generally speaking, when you're trying to sell or work with groups in North America, there's an inherent bias about a female ability. And what I found really interesting too, is being a woman living in the Middle East, they were also very skeptical if I had the ability to execute on the other side. So the feeling of like this bias that in the Middle East, women are not really able to do business, or women are not really able to execute deals. It was super like a double sexism. Here in Africa, we're a 4 female founder team, and super diverse. So I have an Indian co-founder, I have an African co-founder, and I have an American co-founder, and I'm Canadian. And I think what I would encourage female entrepreneurs in the space is to really sell your capabilities as women. Like the way we have built this business is very different than others. And we get opportunities that we wouldn't get if we were a four male founder team. And it's okay. Like I'm not ashamed of taking the opportunities and pursuing the opportunities, like applying for things that are really specifically for female-led companies. We sell it. We see it as something like we lead everything with the fact that we're all women. And it really resonates too, because for our factory number 1, we hired only women. And we were also each of their first job. They'd never, ever been employed, because when you're in rural Kenya, there isn't a lot of job opportunity. You can be casual, you can do things day to day, but, and they trusted us instantly because we were female. To the earlier speaker's point, female to female exchange in agri is super powerful. And most of the horticultural grown in sub-Saharan Africa is by women. It's resoundingly a female portion of farming. So yeah, like I think if you're a female with an idea, like honestly call me, because like I would love to help, and I help a lot of Kenyan entrepreneurs that are female only. I'm like super paying it back, because I think, yeah, it's your time. I think you'll get more help and more support, and yeah, I think it's brilliant, honestly.
Good to know the girl power you have created, and wish you all the best. And thanks a lot for a very candid chat. And I believe it would ensure a lot of fire is being ignited across Africa by seeing that the strength of being women can also be a very big positive when it comes to agriculture. So thanks, Nicole, a lot for participating in Women in Agriculture Web Summit. Look forward to meet you in Kenya and see the great work you're doing in coming days.
Always,
thanks a lot.
Always welcome. Take care,
Cheers.
Deepak. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. So now we go to the next speaker, which is Addy Windsor-Clive. She's heading the funding team of Food.Tech. And the floor is yours.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for having me in the Women in Agriculture World Summit. My name is Addy Windsor-Clive and I work at Food.Tech and I am the head of funding there. A bit about my career and background is that I've been in 10 years in the venture capital sphere, investing in early stage companies in biotech, clean tech, sort of AI, machine learning. And then after I moved on from there, I moved into the food industry where I had my own business for 2 to 3 years. And that really kicked off my sort of passion of food and agriculture, working as a chef in there and understanding about the supply chain and food wastage. And so off the back of that, I decided to marry the two together of my investment background and my interest in the food industry and sort of love of agriculture and farming, and how put it all together and help the early stage, growth stage companies find the funding that they need to make the change that we see tomorrow in the agricultural industry. So that's a bit about me and my career sort of in a nutshell, but I'd love to tell you more about what we do at Food.Tech, our team, and then also give a presentation about what investors are looking for from your pitch deck, the slides you need, and then just a few points and tips about how to get the investment. So if that's okay, I'd love to jump in and share my screen to do the presentation. Okay. Can you see that okay? Is that working?
All good, please.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Just going to say another quick hello to everyone that's maybe come on just for the presentation. So my name's Addy Windsor-Clive and I'm from Food.Tech. And what I'm going to be presenting is pitching best practices. So I'm just going to start off with a little bit about what Food.Tech is and what we do. So Food.Tech was started by Rob Ward, who's our CEO, about 2-3 years ago. And his background is in the agricultural sectors, that he built and grew the first hydroponic field scale strawberry growing system back in his 20s. And then from then it's moved and built and sold 5 agri businesses, and then moved latterly into a grocery accelerator, which was the first CPG, consumer product goods, seed stage accelerator in the world. And he did that for 7 years and was working more on the B2C side in the retail sector of it, and decided that he wanted to move back up to his original roots of working in agri-tech further upstream. And so for the past 2 years, Food.Tech have been helping agri-tech businesses find investment to reach the next level of their growth, and then also to do commercial trials and to commercialize the products and the product fit. So we have 2 sort of sides of the business of what we do. Is that we have one, the technical advisory side, which is, like I was saying, is about if a company needs to do some beta testing and trialing to get data, to gather the traction, to get on board customers, we can help them with that. What we can also do is, that's the first stage of it, is that we can also provide a commercialization plan and a market fit and make the introductions to their key clients. So that sort of, we help them from some of the early stages, really through the whole business plan, through their growth strategy. So that's one side of the business. And then on the other side of the business is the investment side, which is the part that I run. So I'm head of funding. We're not a fund per se, but we link early stage companies with investors. And so what we do is that we have a sort of network of angels and high net worths, family offices and funds. And what we do is we like to create investor profiles and then create a portfolio of companies that we take around. And basically we do the roadshow, and we're the sort of the sales part of the fundraising team for these early stage companies, because as you all know, everyone needs help in this stage. And what we want to do is to make the change of the future and get these companies funded. And so we link up with investors that want to make real impact and really wants to break into the agri-tech industry and hit their ESG goals and sustainability and sort of tackle climate change as well, which is sort of all linked in with the agri-tech. So then a little bit about us as the team. So we have Damien. So when I was talking about the technical advisory side and the commercialization side, Damien runs that, and Damien sort of prides himself on being from pallet to plate. He is boots on the ground knowledge of farmers, the networks and the whole supply chain and how to fit in and the market fit for products. And then there's myself on the investment side. And so we sort of have the two together to marry up exactly what our USP is for Forward Food Tech, which is allowing companies that are trying to invest into this agri-food tech sector but don't know how to. We take that first sort of level of due diligence out by I stress test the companies from an investment point of view and their teams and their financials and their valuations and pitch decks. And Damien tests them from the other side of making sure they've got a minimal viable product, they've got test data and traction. And so what we do when we're going out to investors is that we've already taken that first level of due diligence out, and we become prepared that for companies to then really pinpoint it, or investors to really pinpoint in on what they want from the companies. And then Rob, I explained about Rob's background and setting up Forward Food Tech, and sort of he helps us between the investment side and the technical side. So he's sort of the umbrella helping us all. And then importantly as well, we have Eliana, which works on the digital marketing side and client relations. And so we have our own podcasts, one for Forward Food Tech, but we also run one called the Soil Health Hub. And we also run clubhouses. And so what we like to see is that we're helping not only investors find the right companies, but we're also helping companies understand the markets they're in and sort of a safe peer-to-peer environment to network or to create this agri-tech network. And what we do as well, alongside of the two, investment side and technical side, we have our own sort of accelerator, non-accelerator called the Leadership Hub. And with that, we have a cohort every year of about 8 companies that come in, which are growth stage agri-tech companies from around the world. And it's a free service, but what it is that it's sort of a peer-to-peer session, group session, where you can talk about the trials and tribulations you have of your companies, and there might be similar situations within the other companies, and it's sort of working through that process and giving ideas and networking and contacts. And with that Leadership Hub, we've managed to have some amazing companies out of it that you might, on our last cohort, you might know, Breeder, cattle breeding app platform, It's Fresh, the ethylene capturing technology company. So we've got a new great cohort that have just come in, and we've just kick-started that. So that's sort of a bit about what we do at Forward Food Tech and our team. So I'd love to now jump into talking about pitching best practices. So this is just an overview of what should be in your deck and some pointers and what investors are looking for when you're presenting. So before we even get to this stage, sort of the key things I think for an optimal raise, for when you're really ready to get out there to go investment, is to make sure you've got a very strong business plan. And I know this sounds very obvious, but people can get very distracted as they're going through and chasing after a client, or the client wants something different, so you sort of tailor yourself to them. And it's so important to just stay completely on track and stay on with your growth strategy and just keep your eyes on the prize. Secondly, is to target investors. And so rather than have a scattergun approach and just a sort of reaching out to all funds, find investors that are focusing and investing in your area or have similar investments in the sort of subsectors of agri-tech or food tech, because it's sort of, if you don't want to waste your time or anyone else's time if it's just not even in their remit. And second to that is to utilize your contacts, because cold intros, they do work, but it's much harder. If you can find an introduction to an investor through someone, it's much smoother, and there's always this level of trust. And I think with early stage investment, trust is key. Thirdly, data room. So I've spoken to a lot of companies recently, and they're just pulling their data rooms together as they're speaking to investors. If you can have your data room ready to go, it means you can have your initial investor talk chats, go on to the next level of DD, go into the data room, and it can just all flow smoothly, rather than saying, oh, it's coming, we're in the middle of building it, the process. If you can have it ready to go, it just is short, sharp, and just quick impact is very key, because investors see so many different companies sort of all day, every day. Is to sort of have everything ready to go is just very important. And again, so then going on to arrange investor meetings for a certain time period. And what I mean by this is to have everything, all your initial investor meetings lined up in the space of, let's say, a month. So you really go out there, attack it, get it done. And then once you've done all those, you can recuperate, see who wants to take it to the next level, see who's not interested, understand where you're at, and then go again. So rather than meandering through sort of 6 months of investors here and there, if you just if you have it calculated and have it on a timetable, you can just keep the ball rolling and keep momentum, because fundraising is tiring. And then the last point is allow an extra 3 months on your raise. Just give or take, is that everyone thinks that you might be able to raise in 3 months. And some people do, and some people raise in an hour on Crowdcube and these other funding platforms. But it just gives you a little bit of wiggle room. It just makes sure that you don't run out of cash and you're feeling the pinch towards the very end if you haven't closed. So it's just giving that extra support blanket for you there and safety net. So getting on to, and so key things to remember in the presentation. So be confident. And I know, again, this just sounds very obvious, but people, when they're investing, or investors when they're investing into early stage companies, they're investing into you as the founder, and your whole team. And if you're your own best cheerleader, so you have to be the confident one selling it, believing in it, selling the idea and dream of your product and business. Be concise and straight to the point. This goes back to staying focused slide by slide with the exact information that you need to be giving, no more, no less. Know your numbers. This is just about financials, is that you see it all the time, is that when you're being grilled about it, it's just to have answers and to just know your cap tables inside out, your revenue streams, your profit and loss balance sheets, all of it, just have very good grounding, solid grounding on it. And then lastly, know your investor, is to have done a bit of research about your investor, about what sectors they're in, their interests, and if they've read any research papers or there's any sort of news articles or interviews about them. It's always good to have a background about who you're speaking to. So key things to communicate. These are just the bullet points that we'll be going through in the presentation, sort of explaining who you are, your statement, the problem, business model, market opportunity, target customers, revenue potential, competitors, financials, and the ask, what you're asking for. So let's start. So this is slide 1 of what your deck should be look like. The intro slide, sort of company background. This, define your company in 1 sentence. I cannot tell you how important this is, that I see so many pitch decks and I still don't quite grasp exactly what they're doing. And it seems very obvious to you as a founder, because you live and breathe your company. And you sort of automatically think that everyone else completely understands it and completely lives and breathes it as well, but they don't. And so to have a 1-line sum up of exactly what you do sets the precedent for the whole of the rest of the presentation. The problem. So describe the problem that you will be facing and tackling, whether it's to your customer or to your end consumer, and the current issues that they face. I mean, it could be, for example, of what the industry that we're in is sort of food wastage and supply chain, labour shortages on farms, is to just address exactly what that problem is that you will be solving. The next is your solution. So with this is to state what your product is and exactly what you will be, how you'll be addressing solving this problem, and to give examples of trial data of what your product does, and a case study, I think, is very important here. So not only can an investor see what your product is, but also see how it's been implemented in the market, or at least being implemented in trials. Next one is intellectual property. So this is the most important, or one of the key things that investors look for, along with sort of management teams and product fit, is how defensible is your product in terms of patents. And a lot of what I see specifically in the agri-tech industry is that people aren't putting patents out there, but there are trade secrets. But they will always ask you how this is defensible and why should I invest in you, and no one else will be able to follow in and start up a similar company next month. So through patents or trade secrets, or whether you've got your own algorithm on your sort of SaaS platform that you're working with, or it can also be that the data that you're collecting will put you way ahead or years ahead of competitors. So market size, this is a very important one. So I'm sure you're all aware you have TAM, SAM, and so on. So the total addressable market, the serviceable addressable market, and the service obtainable market. With TAM, you get these huge numbers of the sort of food industry of sort of $1.3 billion of food is wasted a year, tons wasted a year. That's all very well and good, but these numbers get bandied around all the time. What we're really interested in is the service obtainable market. What market share you will be able to obtain in certain geographies, whether it's the UK, the US, or what your growth strategy plan is with this obtainable market. So that's exactly what we'd like to see. And what I can avoid with those is I think one of the things I see from time to time is to say, if I capture 1% of the market, then I'll be equated to 2.25 million revenues a year. These are all sort of finger pie in the sky kind of numbers. What we want to see is very attainable numbers and sort of year-on-year growth that's very achievable. Competitive analysis. This is very important. Even if you are a first mover disruptor in the industry and there is no one else, there is always someone else that is playing around in this sector or in a similar product. And I think investors would like to see that, because there might be other businesses they've invested or know of, and see where you fit within that. And this is easily done with a matrix or a table of what your product does, sort of the tick box of tables. But what I can recommend with the tick box of tables is to do show some weaknesses, because I do see tick box of tables of products, and the company that's pitching to me has got 10 green ticks and everyone else has only got sort of 3 green ticks. Is to show where you can improve your product, and also if someone else is doing it better in the market. It's not a sign of weakness. Investors do like to see that there are other people doing sort of similar things or something else to work towards that you could build into your product sort of application or portfolio. The business model, very important, is to state exactly what your business model is, how you're generating the revenue, the pricing of your products, sort of the average account size, and your growth strategy in terms of your custom pipeline is incredibly important, and how quickly you're going to gain that market share, or how many clients you're going to onboard in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Traction. This goes back to my point about the case studies, is that if you've got a minimal viable product, or beta testing is to show that there is a product fit in the market, and that it's incredibly important with farmers, I think, with traction, is to understand that they will be using it, that they will be using this technology going forward, and that they're happy to move from traditional farming methods to potentially digitizing and modernizing. And so having traction and having the sort of trial data is very important, and it just gives another sort of safety net to investors to know that your product there is a product fit in the market, and that there's an opportunity to be had. So financials, going back to my point of know your financials, it's just to exactly have the grounding on it. So your cash flow, when you're going to become break even, and also what your burn rate is from this raise. So you have this raise, and what we like to see is at least an 18-month runway, just sort of starting, and to make sure that you're not doing this and then doing this raise and then having to raise in 6 months' time because you've run out of money, is to have a good forecast of revenue coming in, your next raise. And the one thing I can say is, I know everyone's always focused on this raise, but you have to be looking ahead to what your next raise will be and the milestones between here and that next point. So team is the most important bit. Like I was saying in the beginning, is that your product and your team and your market fit are the most important thing to investors. So you as your founder have to have the background in the product that you're working with, but also to build the team around you that the investors feel comfortable investing in, and feel, going back to my point about trust, is what they feel safe in the team. And so your founders and your core team is good to have that structured on one slide, and then also to have your board or NEDs or advisory board also in there to show that you have industry experts and strong networks within there to then build out, going back to your growth strategy and your business plan, is that you have the team and support around you to get to that next stage. Then finally, the last slide, which is the most, again, that's the key one, because that's exactly what the investors are here for, is the ask. So you want to be able, how much you're going to be raising, your use of proceeds. So they want to know what the money will be going towards and how long, going back to the burn rate, exactly how long this is going to last you. So a nice way of putting this is, if you don't want to put exact numbers or the breakdown of $1 million, you want to say 250 for sales, another one for product development, is to do a pie chart of just a rough idea, so investors can visually see what the money will be broken down to and going towards, but you don't have to put specific numbers onto it. And then the valuation. Valuation obviously it's up for negotiation, but it's a starting point that investors can work off. And I think I see this a lot where people don't put their valuation on, or they think that it'll scare it off. But investors are always open to negotiating valuations and understanding more of it. This will happen as you go further down the due diligence route and when you get to term sheets, but they're not always set in stone, but they like to know what they're working with. And then sort of the final thing, this is UK specific, but whether you're an EIS or an SEIS eligible company, or whatever the tax scheme relief might be for your relevant country, is always interesting to put on there as well, so that companies and investors know that there's an option there, or that it's a viable opportunity. So that is that sort of sums up pitching decks and best practices. And all I can say is good luck with your presentations, and I hope you get investments. There we go. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. So thanks for a very interesting presentation, and I'll say that bird's eye view of how to raise funds and investments. So it was really I'll say that very useful for our audience. I've got just a couple of questions here, and the first thing is that as you rightly said, valuation is a sticky subject, right? Whether you are on an investor side or you are on a startup side. So can you share some rule of thumb that in case somebody wants to value, right? So whether they should say 5 years of estimates for discounted cash flow, or what factors they should be considering, right? 60%, 50%. So that would help.
So yeah, exactly. So I mean, the sort of the standard industry thing that you see at the moment is that for your seed round, and it's a little bit different for your Series A, is that people are giving away 20% of the company. And so you then work your valuation off the back of, this is what I see, is that you know what you want to raise because you found your use of proceeds. You then want to give 20% of the company away. So then you work your valuation off the back of that. This is what I'm seeing a lot in the market. If you're coming from a pure venture capital or investment point of view, it's not always the way to do it, because you can do valuations from predicted revenues, what competitors are being priced at in the market. So that's what people are doing, but you can do it from predicted revenues, what other competitors are doing. You can also do it off the most common way, and that sort of is off your last round. But that's probably more at Series A. When you've done your last round, you've hit a few milestones, so there's a bit of an uptick. But you can state why there's been improvements in the business and the product and in the company to warrant that uptick from your valuation from your last round. So there are a few different ways of doing it, but I think at the seed stage, I'd work on the norm seems to be 20% for the amount that you want to raise. Perfect.
That's very interesting. Now, the second and the last question for you would be I would like to understand investors' perspective when they see a single strong founder, or they see a single strong founder and couple of I'll say that supportive co-founders, and then they see 3 or 4 co-founders. Where do you see that investors are more inclined to put their money?
Well, I think you definitely don't want to have just one single co-founder, because I think it's that thing going back to sort of key man. If something happened to that founder, then the whole company is based upon it, and that's a worry, is that you do want to have a bit of an even keel, that you have at least 2 people in there. But then again, I don't think you want to go up to having 4 co-founders. That you sort of, how I see it in the companies that I've looked at, is that you have 2 founders. One is sort of the ideas, the get up, the go, and then the other side is the steady, even getting the business plan getting it done. So you have the two complementary. It doesn't always work out because, I mean, some of what we see with seed companies is that, what I've worked with a lot is that you're commercializing sort of intellectual property from research institutes. So you do get sort of two sort of CTOs or sort of researchers, but then it's part of that advisory board side to bring in potentially another person that's going to provide that sort of structure and business side of it. So you've got the ideas and the product, and then you've got the business side of it to really even it out. That's what we'd really like to see. Okay, just follow-up question on the same. So when you say that couple of founders, so do you see them to be a little bit more different just on the, I'm saying not as the risk-taking capacity, but also the functional level? Or it is okay to have this similarity in the function, but maybe just balancing each out? Yeah, I think you two normally when you've got founders together is that they've been working together on a project from somewhere else, or they've come together on this project. So they might be very similar. But I think what they want to see, an investor wants to see, is that there are different strengths with each person, and so it doesn't matter necessarily that you have the same sort of similar backgrounds. Is that you're covering all aspects and bringing everything like a rounded package to the table that is safe for investors to invest in, rather than completely just sort of doing technology side of it, but not really having any business acumen or understanding of how to grow a company, which is essentially what needs to be done at this stage. Perfect. That's a great answer. In fact, actually, I'm working with one company in which actually there are two co-founders. One is 60 plus and other is 30 minus. Right. So in fact, they balance each other so well, and I see that as one of the winning formula going forward, because we see in agriculture and food industry, you need both aggression as well as balance, cool head. So thanks a lot. thanks a lot for a really interesting and I'll say that insightful presentation. I'm pretty sure our audience would have loved it. And thanks again for being a part of Women in Agriculture Web Summit, because I believe when women are able to achieve, then the women get motivated. So thanks a lot. Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to speak and to be amongst all of the other amazing women that are speaking at this summit. Thank you so much, Deepak.
So that brings us to the last section of this long session, focusing on Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And here we would like to tell a little bit about what we do. So we at Honeybee, we work on intersection of agriculture and technology. We do our farming. We support those initiatives which are related to working on ground. So we are doing farming on ground in multiple countries, supporting farmers, both community and corporate. At the same time, we also work with a lot of top tech companies from all across the globe, from Europe to Israel to North America, where we try to help them with their go-to-market strategy in Africa and Asia. And finally, we work to create awesome content like this so that we are able to make a difference to the agriculture ecosystem. Today, I would like to share with you a project we are associated with. It's called Evolving Roots. And this is an initiative of two young founders, Arjun and Rajvi, and they are doing an awesome job of creating a sustainable as well as regenerative agriculture project where they are creating superfoods, and we are supporting them with an intention that this can become a model which can be replicated across the globe. Without further talking too much about it, let me share a small video which talk about Evolving Root and some views from Rajvi.
Today, We humans are harming the healthy soil and its existence. We are wasting both food and water like never before. If we continue in our ways, what will we leave behind for our descendants? What will be our legacy? Our health is connected with the health of our planet. At Evolving Roots, our goal is to deliver safe and nutritious food with minimum impact on the environment by embracing farmer engagement, cutting-edge technology, a sustainable business model, and an impact-driven philosophy. In the next 5 years, we will scale to over 1,000 hectares of land spread across the globe, on which we will produce over 14,600 metric tons of superfoods. We will feed that to over 500,000 people every day. Sustainability, traceability, and transparency give hope and build trust. Through scientific practices and demand-driven cultivation, we seek out a scalable business model to increase profits by better ensuring that all the people can have access to nutritious food. Our focus is on the superfoods, and we have begun on that journey. Ginger, turmeric, and moringa are our first offerings. With sustainable practices and use of modern technology, we will gain efficiency in increasing crop yields, reducing soil loss, reducing food and water wastage, and improving livelihood for local farmers. We need to consider the people who are growing our food. Sustainability involves focusing on the well-being of ourselves, our families, and our farmers. We don't want to be the generation that lets it go. If in 100 years from now, this still exists, everybody wins, and that will be our legacy. Evolving Roots has given us an opportunity to evolve, and by doing so, be able to contribute and engage with the hearts and hands of those who explore the transformational potential of digital agriculture to feed the world in a way that delivers healthier people, healthier economies, and a healthier planet.
I have spent over 10 plus years generating ideas in the field of fashion and food and beverage. I thrive on acting on consumer intent and creative execution. I have been fortunate to serve in roles that fulfill a multitude of diverse responsibilities. I think of my career in multi-layered chapters with pressing importance on diversified narratives that find a way to come full circle while teaching valuable lessons along the way. I have spent a decade building my career in fashion and apparel design, and then I stumbled upon food and beverage because I'm constantly trying to evolve myself and start a journey where I get to touch subjects from product conundrum to the never-ending game of factors influencing the food and beverage to the future of FMCG markets. For generations, agriculture was considered as a men's occupation. Women have been on the field sowing, harvesting, winnowing, and sorting for ages, and yet we never see or hear about them when we talk about agriculture. You have to search for them in books, art, and archives. Simply because they are women, their names are kept off from land documents. With no land to their name, women are completely at the mercy of their husbands or their family. 75% of the full-time workers on Indian farms are women. They plow the field and they feed the country as much as any other male farmer. Women who show up, who bring their full selves to the table and take up space, despite the legal rights, social and cultural forces deny women ownership of land. They constantly live in insecurity. I have heard countless stories of oppression and realized that women are the lowest of low in the pyramid of our social structure. My goal is to empower them and make them aware of what they bring to the table. Evolving Roots is into the business of progressive and sustainable agriculture. In Gujarat, we have already put up a fine infrastructure in place with the right kind of people, technology, and value system. Our goal is to deliver safe and nutritious food with minimum impact on environment by embracing farmer engagement, cutting-edge technology, sustainable business model, and an impact-driven investment philosophy. Currently, on a 20 hectare of land, we have begun sowing ginger, turmeric, and moringa. This is our demo farm, which we intend on duplicating. The idea is to scale this business to 1,000 hectares over the next 5 years and increase our basket of superfoods that we can offer. Through this, the aim is to produce 14,600 metric tons of superfood annually, with a goal of delivering to 500,000 people every day. Intensive agricultural methods have stripped increasing amounts of nutrients from the soil in which the food we eat grows. When it comes to the health benefits, some foods have more nutrition to offer than the regularly grown commodity foods. These are known as superfoods. Our focus lies only on growing superfoods that are packed in nutrition and has some special type of nutrient that's rare to find in the modern diet. Nutrition and agriculture must work together. At Evolving Roots, our agriculture practices improve nutrition and outputs and create easier access to different types of superfoods. We focus on growing only nutrient-rich and diverse foods. Our concentration will remain on superfoods, and we shall be doing everything in a scientific manner in order to increase the yields while avoiding food and water wastage, since everything would be demand-based. Our produce will be 100% traceable. At Evolving Roots, we believe in the power of regeneration. The choices that we make around soil and food in the next 10 years will determine the next century of human civilization. Do we want a dry, rocky, eroded terrain, or a biodiverse ecosystem that produces nutritious and healthy humans? This is a question that we ask every day at Evolving Roots. From a layperson's point of view, the main concept behind regenerative agriculture is to support biodiversity within the soil. Keeping this in mind, we are empowering a new generation of farmers to approach agriculture as a key component of our efforts for sustainability. With this, we are beginning our journey keeping in mind the importance of soil health. Earth can thrive only when humanity finds balance with all living systems. Admiration and correspondence are the foundation of our relationship with our planet. Our engagement in ecosystem regeneration is restoring the health of the soil, the quality of nutrition, the conservation of water, atmosphere, and our communities. As a part of our top priority, both from a business and personal perspective, we intend to make sure that we adopt regenerative practices and make the farms and the ecosystem highly sustainable. We intend to get into partnerships with companies globally for buyback opportunities and intend on employing the best of technology. The precision and efficiency is key to making sure we produce more but with less resources. Lastly, we are now also seeking and welcoming investments into our project to help us scale faster while maintaining our focus. It shall ensure we are able to contribute in a larger way immediately towards our goal of a sustainable planet.
So with this, we would thank all of you for your patient hearing and participating in the second session. We look forward to your participation in the third session of Women in Agriculture Web Summit, where our focus would shift to the continent everybody is looking forward for innovation: North America, Central America, and South America. So see you soon and look forward to have more engagements with some of the global change makers who happens to be women. So thanks, everyone. Goodbye.